Hi everyone, welcome to Ricktopus. I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to argue that Rick and Morty isn't just a science fiction comedy about interdimensional adventures. It's a complete philosophical education disguised as a cartoon about a drunk scientist and his anxious grandson. By examining how each character embodies a distinct philosophical framework, from Rick's cosmic nihilism to Morty's reluctant existentialism, from Jerry's blissful ignorance to Beth's trauma-driven superiority complex, and by exploring what Mr. Meeseeks teaches us about predetermined purpose, what evil Morty reveals about breaking free from fate, and what the show ultimately says about living in a universe that fundamentally doesn't care whether you exist, we can understand how this animated series became one of the most profound explorations of meaning, identity, free will, and human connection in modern television. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough. Let's begin. Rick Sanchez, the philosopher king of cosmic nihilism. Rick Sanchez is the smartest man in the universe. That's not an exaggeration or a joke. It's stated repeatedly throughout the show. He's created a portal gun that lets him travel to any dimension, any universe, any reality he wants. He's built technology that defies the laws of physics. He's outsmarted galactic governments, ancient alien civilizations, and even the devil himself. But here's the thing about being the smartest person in infinite realities. When you know everything, when you've seen everything, when you understand that there are literally infinite versions of every person in every moment, nothing really matters anymore. And that's exactly where Rick's philosophy begins. At the core of Rick's character is something called nihilism. Now, before you click away because that sounds like a complicated word, let me break it down simply. Nihilism is the belief that life has no real meaning or purpose. Rick looks at the universe, sees how massive and old and uncaring it is, and concludes that nothing we do actually matters. There are infinite universes where infinite versions of every person make infinite different choices, so how can any single choice be meaningful? This is Rick's worldview, and it shapes absolutely everything he does. Let's look at the evidence. In the pilot episode, Rick drags Morty out of school to go on an adventure, and he makes Morty shove seeds way up his rectum to smuggle them through interdimensional customs. When Morty protests, Rick doesn't care. He needs those seeds for his experiment, and Morty's comfort doesn't factor into his decision. This sets up Rick's character immediately. He'll do whatever he wants because, in his mind, nothing really matters anyway, so why not? But the clearest example of Rick's nihilism comes in the episode Rick Potion number 9. Morty asks Rick to make a love potion to get his crush Jessica to like him. Rick creates the potion, but it goes horribly wrong. The potion spreads like a virus, and soon every person on Earth except for Morty's family has turned into grotesque monsters that Rick calls Cronenbergs, named after the horror director. The entire planet is now a nightmare wasteland. This is a catastrophic, world-ending mistake. So what does Rick do? Does he spend years trying to fix it? Does he feel guilty? Number. He finds a dimension where another Rick solved the problem, but then immediately died in an explosion along with that dimension's Morty. Rick and our Morty simply portal into this dimension, bury their own dead bodies in the backyard, and take their places. They literally replace themselves. Morty has to bury his own corpse, while Rick acts like this is just another Tuesday. This scene is crucial because it shows Rick's ultimate philosophical position. When there are infinite realities with infinite versions of yourself, death doesn't even matter. Consequences don't matter. Your original dimension doesn't matter. You can just jump to another one where things worked out better and call it a day. Rick has made the multiverse his escape hatch from meaning itself. But here's where it gets interesting. Rick's catchphrase throughout the early seasons is "wubba lubba dub dub." He says it constantly, usually when he's drunk or doing something reckless. Everyone treats it like a fun nonsense phrase. But in the episode Ricksy Business, Bird Person, one of Rick's oldest friends, reveals what it actually means in his language. It translates to, "I am in great pain, please help me." Think about that. Rick's signature phrase, the thing he yells while partying and destroying things, is literally a cry for help. His nihilism isn't joyful freedom, it's a defense mechanism against unbearable pain. We see this pain explicitly in the episode Autoerotic Assimilation. Rick reunites with Unity, a hive mind entity he used to date. Unity can control entire planets of people, and when Rick is with Unity, they go on a destructive bender together. They party, they experiment on on people, they do terrible things just because they can. But then Unity realizes that Rick is bad for her development and breaks up with him. Rick is left alone in the garage. What happens next is one of the darkest moments in the entire series. Rick sets up a machine to vaporize himself. He's going to commit suicide. We watch him slump over his workbench, getting drunker and drunker, building this death machine while sad music plays. The only reason he doesn't go through with it is because he literally passes out from alcohol before he can activate it. The smartest man in the universe, who claims nothing matters, was seconds away from ending his own life because a relationship ended. This tells us something important about Rick's philosophy. He doesn't actually believe his own nihilism makes him free or happy. He's using it as armor. If nothing matters, then he can't be hurt. If everyone is replaceable, then he can't lose anyone. If there's no meaning to anything, then he doesn't have to feel the weight of his choices. But the armor doesn't work. He's miserable. His alcoholism isn't a fun character quirk. It's how he numbs himself to the pain of his own worldview. The show revealed Rick's backstory in the episode The Rick Shank Rickdemption. When Rick is captured by the Galactic Federation, he shows them a memory of his past. In this memory, we see Rick as a younger man with a wife named Diane and a young daughter named Beth. Another Rick appears and offers our Rick the secret to interdimensional travel, the portal gun technology. Our Rick refuses because he's happy with his simple life. But then, that other Rick drops a bomb through a portal and it explodes, killing Diane and young Beth right in front of Rick. Now, Rick initially claims this memory is fake, just something he made up to trick his captors. But later, in the episode Rick Mirai Jack, we learn it was real. Rick's wife and daughter actually were killed. That's why he invented the portal gun, to hunt down the Rick who murdered his family. He traveled through countless dimensions trying to find this killer Rick, which the show calls Rick Prime, but he never found him. Eventually, Rick just gave up and crashed into the garage of a different Beth in a different dimension, the one we've been watching the whole time. This explains everything about Rick's character. He's not some cool, carefree genius who just happens to be nihilistic. He's a man who lost everything that mattered to him, and then spent decades searching infinite universes for revenge, only to fail. The Rick we know isn't even living with his original family. He attached himself to random strangers who happen to have the same faces as his dead loved ones. His nihilism isn't philosophical wisdom. It's what happened when the universe took everything from him and proved that caring about anything just leads to suffering. Rick also uses alcohol constantly throughout the series. He's drunk in nearly every episode. He drinks from a flask he keeps in his lab coat, and he's often slurring his words or stumbling around. This isn't played entirely for laughs. The show makes it clear that Rick's alcoholism is a problem. In the episode The Old Man and the Seat, Rick finds a perfect toilet on a distant planet, literally the only place in the universe where he feels at peace. But when someone else uses his toilet, Rick sets up elaborate traps to catch them. Eventually, Rick sits on his own toilet and the traps activate, creating holograms that mock him. The holograms say things like, "You act like you're not a part of everything," and accuse him of isolating himself from the world. Rick breaks down crying. Even his own inventions are telling him that his isolation is making him miserable. He knows intellectually that nothing matters, but emotionally, he can't escape the need for connection. He's trapped between what his brain tells him and what his heart needs. We also see Rick's nihilism in how he treats relationships. In countless episodes, he acts like he doesn't care about anyone. He insults Jerry constantly, calling him an idiot and saying he ruins everything. He drags Morty into dangerous situations without seeming to care if Morty gets hurt. He even admits in the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind that the reason he brings Morty on adventures is because Morty's dumb brainwaves cancel out Rick's genius brainwaves, making them harder to track. Morty is literally a human shield. But then, in that same episode, when Rick's memories are scanned by other Ricks, we see something unexpected. We see memories of baby Morty. We see Rick caring for him, holding him, watching him grow up. Rick has genuine emotions buried under all that cynicism and cruelty. The problem is that Rick believes showing those emotions makes him weak. In a universe where nothing matters and everyone is replaceable, caring about someone is the same as setting yourself up for inevitable pain. This creates a contradiction at the heart of Rick's character. He's smart enough to know that nihilism is the logical conclusion when you understand the true scope of the multiverse, but he's human enough to still feel love, loss, and loneliness despite knowing better. This is why Rick is such a tragic figure. He can't unknow what he knows about the universe, but he also can't stop caring even though caring only hurts him. The show even addresses this directly in the episode Pickle Rick. Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid going to family therapy. He literally chooses to become a cucumber rather than talk about his feelings. He builds an exoskeleton out of rat parts and fights his way through a government building, all to maintain his emotional isolation. But at the end, the therapist, Dr. Wong, sees right through him. She tells the family that Rick turned himself into a pickle because he has control over that, whereas therapy would require him to be vulnerable. She says that Rick's intelligence is both a gift and a curse, because he uses it to justify avoiding emotional work. Rick doesn't disagree with her. He just leaves. This is Rick's pattern throughout the show. When confronted with the emotional reality of his choices, he runs. He portals away, he gets drunk, he makes a joke. Anything to avoid sitting with the discomfort of actually feeling something. Throughout all of this, Rick maintains his position that nothing in the universe has inherent meaning or value. In the episode The Ricks Must Be Crazy, Rick shows Morty that his car battery is actually an entire miniature universe where tiny people generate electricity for Rick's car without knowing it. When Morty points out how messed up this is, Rick shrugs. He created an entire civilization just to power his vehicle. Those people's lives, dreams, and civilizations exist solely to charge a battery. To Rick, this is fine, because intelligence gives him the right to exploit lesser beings. It's pure cosmic nihilism. The strong can do whatever they want because the universe doesn't have rules beyond what you can get away with. But even this episode reveals cracks in Rick's armor. The scientist in the miniature universe, Zeep Zanflorp, creates his own miniature universe to power his world, and then someone in that universe does the same thing. Rick realizes he's part of a chain, that maybe he's also just a battery for some higher being's car. The thought terrifies him because it means he's not the smartest, he's not in control, and his entire philosophy might be exactly what something smarter wants him to believe. Rick's nihilism only works if he's at the top. If he's not, then he's just another exploited particle in someone else's experiment. Rick Sanchez is the ultimate expression of what happens when intelligence meets meaninglessness. He looked into the infinite void of the multiverse, understood that nothing we do echoes in eternity, and decided that this means he can do whatever he wants. But underneath all the drinking, the cruelty, and the scientific achievements is a man in constant pain. He lost his family, he failed his revenge quest, he attached himself to strangers wearing familiar faces, and now he's trapped. Too smart to lie to himself about meaning, but too human to actually stop caring. This is why Rick is such a compelling character. He represents the darkest possible answer to life's biggest question. If nothing matters, why keep living? Rick's answer seems to be, I don't know, but I'm too stubborn to stop. He's a warning about what happens when you let your understanding of the universe's indifference turn into personal indifference toward everything around you. Rick proves that you can be the smartest person in existence and still be completely wrong about how to live. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Rick's cosmic nihilism is only one response to an uncaring universe. His grandson Morty started as the perfect opposite, naive, hopeful, and desperately wanting to believe that actions have consequences and morality matters. Watching Morty's transformation from innocent kid to someone who understands the void but chooses differently than Rick shows us that maybe intelligence and awareness don't have to lead to Rick's conclusions. Maybe there's another way to live when you know the universe doesn't care. Section 2. Morty Smith, The Accidental Existentialist's Journey. Morty Smith starts the series as a 14-year-old kid with average grades, low self-esteem, and a stutter that comes out whenever he's nervous, which is almost always. He's not particularly smart, not particularly brave, and not particularly special in any way. He's just a regular teenager who gets dragged on interdimensional adventures by his grandfather. But over the course of the show, Morty goes through one of the most profound philosophical transformations in television. He becomes someone who fully understands that the universe is meaningless and uncaring, yet still chooses to care anyway. This makes Morty the show's true hero, even if he doesn't look like one. In the beginning, Morty serves as our audience stand-in. When Rick does something horrible, Morty protests. When Rick acts like morality doesn't exist, Morty insists it does. In the pilot episode, when Rick wants Morty to smuggle seeds in his rectum, Morty is horrified. When Rick gets drunk and nearly crashes the spaceship in Lawnmower Dog, Morty begs him to be more responsible. Morty represents normal human morality, the belief that right and wrong exist, that you should try to be good, and that actions have consequences that matter. But then, Rick Potion number 9 happens, and everything changes for Morty. As we discussed in the last section, this is the episode where Morty asks Rick to make a love potion for his crush, Jessica. The potion goes wrong and turns everyone on Earth into monsters. Rick fixes the problem in another dimension, then he and Morty travel to that dimension and literally replace the versions of themselves who just died. Morty has to bury his own corpse in the backyard while his family eats breakfast inside, completely unaware that he's a different Morty than the one they had yesterday. This moment breaks something fundamental in Morty. He's staring at his own dead body, covered in dirt, and he realizes that his grandfather was right. There are infinite versions of him. He's replaceable. His life doesn't have cosmic significance because there are countless other Mortys living countless other lives across infinite dimensions. The camera lingers on Morty's face as he processes this, and you can see his innocence dying in real time. The impact of this shows up later in the episode Rixty Minutes. The family is watching interdimensional cable television, seeing shows from infinite other realities. Summer discovers that in many dimensions, her parents got an abortion instead of having her. She's devastated and decides to run away because she thinks she ruined her parents' lives by existing. Morty follows her to her room and stops her. What Morty says in this scene is one of the most important quotes in the entire series. He tells Summer that nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, and everybody is going to die. Then he suggests they go watch TV. On the surface, this sounds completely nihilistic, the kind of thing Rick might say. But there's a crucial difference. Morty isn't saying these things to justify cruelty or selfishness. He's saying them to comfort his sister. He's saying that if nothing has cosmic meaning, then Summer didn't ruin anything by being born. Her existence is just as valid or invalid as any other existence. And since we're all going to die anyway, we might as well spend time together watching TV. This is where Morty starts to become something more than just Rick's sidekick. He's developing his own philosophy, one that accepts the universe's meaninglessness, but doesn't use it as an excuse to stop caring about people. He understands what Rick understands about reality, but he responds completely differently. This is the beginning of Morty's journey toward what we might call practical wisdom in an absurd universe. But Morty's transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it's not always pretty. The show keeps track of Morty's accumulated trauma in an episode called Morty's Mind Blowers. We learn that Rick has been selectively erasing Morty's memories when adventures get too traumatic. There's a whole room full of memory vials labeled with experiences like Morty dates a girl with a weird disability and Morty causes the deaths of millions. Each vial represents a moment so horrible that Rick decided Morty couldn't handle remembering it. When Morty and Summer find this room and start watching the memories, we see just how much Morty has been through. He's seen things that would destroy most people's sanity. He's made mistakes that killed countless beings. He's been betrayed, humiliated, and traumatized in ways that would require years of therapy to process. And Rick has been quietly removing these memories to keep Morty functional. This raises a disturbing question. How much of Morty's personality is real, and how much is just what's left after Rick deleted the worst parts? Despite all this memory manipulation, Morty keeps developing emotionally and philosophically. In the episode, the Vat of Acid episode, Rick gives Morty a remote control that lets him save his place in life and then reload that save point later, like in a video game. At first, Morty thinks this is amazing. He can do whatever he wants without consequences. He can ask out girls, pull pranks, even commit crimes, and then just reload his save and undo everything. Morty uses this power to live an entire life with a girl he meets. They survive a plane crash together, they fall in love, they nearly freeze to death in the wilderness and save each other. Morty experiences what feels like true connection and meaning. But then, Jerry accidentally hits the remote, and Morty is sent back to the moment where he first saw this girl. All those experiences, the love, the survival, the connection, are erased. The girl doesn't remember him. It never happened for her. Morty is destroyed by this. He realizes that even though he still has the memories, they're meaningless if they didn't create real consequences in the world. This teaches Morty something crucial about meaning and existence. Consequences are what make experiences matter. If you can always undo things, then nothing you do has weight. Morty learns that meaning comes from the fact that our choices affect the real world and real people in permanent ways. This is a huge philosophical development. Morty is understanding that even in a universe without cosmic meaning, individual moments can still matter because they have real effects on real people. He's finding meaning in the small and local, rather than looking for it in the grand and cosmic. This is very different from Rick's approach, which is to dismiss everything because it doesn't matter on a universal scale. We also see Morty becoming more capable and competent as the series progresses. In early episodes, he's constantly screaming and begging Rick to take them home. By later seasons, Morty is piloting spaceships, handling weapons, and solving problems on his own. In the episode Morty Night Run, Morty actually stands up to Rick and refuses to let him kill someone Morty thinks is innocent. When Rick dismisses him, Morty saves the person anyway and faces the consequences. This shows Morty developing moral courage. He's willing to disagree with the smartest man in the universe because he believes some things are worth standing up for, even if they don't matter cosmically. Morty is choosing to care about individual lives, even though he knows those lives are tiny and temporary in the scope of infinity. The relationship with Planetina in the episode A Rick Convenient Mort shows another side of Morty's growth. Planetina is a being made of the four elements, who works for a corporation that owns her. Morty falls in love with her and helps her escape from the people who control her. For a while, it's beautiful. Morty has found someone who understands him and cares about him. But then Planetina starts killing people who are harming the environment. She's willing to murder because she believes the cause justifies it. Morty has to make a choice. He could stay with someone he loves, or he could stand by his moral principles. He chooses his principles. He tells Planetina that killing people is wrong, even for a good cause. When she won't stop, he breaks up with her, even though it breaks his heart. This is huge character growth. Morty is establishing his own moral code and sticking to it, even when it costs him something he desperately wants. This is very different from how Rick would handle the situation. Rick would probably either join in the killing because it doesn't matter anyway, or he'd leave because he doesn't want the complications. But Morty actually engages with the moral question and makes a principled decision. He's becoming his own person with his own values. Throughout the series, we see Morty struggling with what he's becoming. He's picked up some of Rick's cynicism and capability, but he hasn't completely lost his compassion and moral center. In Season 5, Morty starts calling Rick out more directly. In the episode Forgetting Sarek Mortshall, Morty tells Rick that he needs to clean up his messes and stop leaving chaos everywhere he goes. Morty is holding Rick accountable in ways he never could in early seasons. But Morty also shows Rick compassion that Rick doesn't show himself. When Rick is vulnerable or scared, Morty doesn't mock him or abandon him. In Rick Mirai Jack, when all of Rick's secrets come out about his dead family and his failed revenge quest, Morty processes this information but doesn't use it as a weapon against Rick. He just accepts it as part of who Rick is. This balance, holding Rick accountable while also showing compassion, is what makes Morty's philosophy so interesting. He's not a pushover who forgives everything, but he's also not cruel or dismissive. He's learned that you can understand why someone is the way they are without excusing their harmful behavior. He can acknowledge that the universe doesn't care while still choosing to care himself. One of Morty's defining characteristics is his ability to adapt to horrible situations while maintaining some core sense of self. In the episode, Look Who's Purging Now, Morty and Rick visit a planet where once a year, all crime is legal for one night. Morty gets caught up in the violence and actually becomes really good at fighting and killing. For a moment, he seems to enjoy it, but when the purge ends, Morty is horrified by what he did. He doesn't make excuses or pretend it was fine. He confronts the fact that he's capable of terrible things, and that scares him. This self-awareness is key to Morty's character. Unlike Rick, who dismisses his own terrible actions as meaningless, Morty actually grapples with his choices. He looks at what he's done and asks himself if that's who he wants to be. This ongoing self-examination is what prevents Morty from becoming another Rick. The show also uses Morty to explore the cost of knowledge and awareness. In Morty's Mind Blowers, one memory shows Morty asking Rick a simple question about a photo. Rick's answer reveals something that causes Morty to scream in existential horror. We never learn what Rick told him, but it was clearly some truth about reality so terrible that Morty begged Rick to erase the memory. This suggests there are things about the universe that are genuinely unbearable to know. But here's what makes Morty remarkable. Even with all the trauma, all the horrible truths, and all the evidence that nothing matters, he keeps choosing to engage with life. He keeps trying to do the right thing. He keeps forming connections with people, even though he knows those connections are temporary and ultimately meaningless in cosmic terms. Morty has looked into the same void that Rick looked into, but he decided to respond with compassion instead of cruelty. By the later seasons, Morty has become someone who can comfort his sister with nihilistic truth, stand up to his grandfather's abuse, make principled moral choices even when they hurt, and navigate the multiverse with competence while somehow maintaining his humanity. He's not innocent anymore. He can't be after everything he's seen and done. But he's not broken either. He's become something more interesting. Someone who knows the worst truths about reality, but chooses kindness anyway. This is what makes Morty an existentialist hero. He accepts that existence comes before essence, that there's no predetermined meaning to life, and that the universe doesn't care about human values. But instead of using this as an excuse for cruelty like Rick does, or drowning in despair, Morty creates his own meaning through his choices and relationships. He proves that you can stare into the meaningless void and then turn around and care about people anyway. Morty's journey shows us that confronting cosmic meaninglessness doesn't have to break you or turn you into a monster. You can acknowledge the absurdity of existence and still choose to be decent. You can know that nothing matters objectively while still deciding that things matter to you subjectively. Morty found a way to live authentically in an absurd universe without becoming either delusional or cruel. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Rick represents pure nihilism and Morty represents growing wisdom in the face of absurdity, there's another member of the family whose approach to existence is completely different. Jerry Smith shows us what happens when someone goes through life completely unaware of these deeper questions, and somehow his ignorance might be its own kind of philosophy. Section 3. Jerry Smith, the philosophy of mediocrity and normosis. Jerry Smith is unemployed for most of the series. When he does have a job, it's in advertising, where his biggest accomplishment is a campaign that asks, "Hungry for apples?" which is just a copy of an old Got Milk ad. He's insecure, cowardly, and constantly seeking validation from everyone around him. Rick calls him an idiot in nearly every episode they share. His own wife, Beth, barely respects him. His kids often ignore him. By every measure that society uses to judge success, Jerry is a failure. But here's the strange thing. Jerry's complete averageness, his total mediocrity, his inability to grasp the deeper philosophical questions that torture Rick and challenge Morty, these might actually be their own kind of survival strategy. Jerry represents something specific in philosophy that was identified by a thinker named Pierre Way, who called it normosis. The idea is simple. Being completely normal, completely average, and completely conventional can actually be its own type of sickness. Jerry doesn't question reality. He doesn't wonder about meaning. He doesn't look at the universe and feel existential dread. He just wants a comfortable life where people like him and tell him he's doing a good job. In a show about cosmic horror and meaninglessness, Jerry is the only character who genuinely doesn't seem bothered by any of it. Not because he's wise, but because he's completely unaware. The clearest example of Jerry's philosophy comes in the episode Meeseeks and Destroy. Rick gives the family a Meeseeks box, which creates blue creatures called Mr. Meeseeks, who exist only to complete one task and then disappear. Summer asks her Meeseeks to make her more popular at school. Beth asks hers to help her become a more complete woman. These are complicated, meaningful requests. Jerry? Jerry asks his Meeseeks to help him take 2 strokes off his golf game. Think about that. Jerry has access to a magical creature that can help him with literally anything, and he uses it to get slightly better at golf. Not to achieve his dreams, not to fix his marriage, not to become a better father, just to improve at a hobby by a tiny amount. This tells us everything about how Jerry sees the world. He makes everything small. He reduces infinite possibility down to minor, comfortable improvements in areas that don't really matter. But here's where it gets interesting. The Meeseeks can't help Jerry improve at golf. Jerry is so fundamentally mediocre that even magical beings struggle to make him slightly better at anything. The Meeseeks keep existing, which causes them horrible pain because they're supposed to complete their task and disappear. More and more Meeseeks get created to help, and they all start going insane because Jerry simply cannot improve. His mediocrity is so complete that it defeats magical intervention. The Meeseeks eventually become violent and try to kill Jerry, reasoning that if he's dead, the task becomes impossible and they can finally stop existing. Jerry runs away and hides while these creatures hold people hostage trying to get to him. In the end, Jerry does manage to show a tiny bit of improvement in his golf swing, and the Meeseeks disappear. But the episode makes it clear. Jerry's inability to grow or change isn't just a personal failing, it actively causes problems for everyone around him. Another perfect example of Jerry's character comes in M. Night Shyamalan's Aliens. In this episode, aliens trap the family in a simulation designed to trick Rick into revealing the formula for his concentrated dark matter fuel. Jerry's simulation is particularly revealing. In Jerry's perfect world, the simulation designed to make him happy and comfortable, everyone constantly tells him he's great. In the simulation, Jerry goes to his advertising job where his boss praises him for his brilliant Hungry for Apples campaign. His co-workers applaud him. He wins an award. The mailman stops him on the street to tell him he's a fan. His wife can't keep her hands off him. Everything in Jerry's ideal reality is just people validating him for doing the bare minimum. He doesn't dream of actually being creative or talented or making a real difference. He just wants constant reassurance that his mediocrity is actually excellence. The saddest part is that Jerry can't even tell he's in a simulation. Rick figures it out immediately. Morty gets suspicious. But Jerry is so desperate for validation that he accepts this obviously fake world without question. When people tell him his stolen slogan is brilliant, he doesn't wonder if maybe they're being controlled or lying. He just accepts it because it's what he wants to hear. Jerry's need for approval blinds him to obvious truth. This connects to something a philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about, which he called the last man. Nietzsche warned about a future where humans would become so comfortable and mediocre that they'd stop striving for anything greater. The last man doesn't want to overcome challenges or grow as a person. He just wants comfort, safety, and for everyone to tell him he's doing fine. The last man makes everything small and safe because anything big or challenging is scary. This is Jerry exactly. We see this in how Jerry handles conflict. In the episode The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy, Jerry is at his lowest point. Beth has divorced him, the kids barely talk to him, and he's living in a sad apartment. Rick actually takes Jerry on an adventure, not out of kindness, but because Rick wants Jerry away from Beth while Rick deals with something else. They go to an alien resort where nothing can die because of a special field around it. At this resort, Jerry meets another sad alien who also got divorced. They bond over their mutual misery. But then, this alien reveals he's actually part of a plot to kill Rick. He wants Jerry to help lure Rick outside the protective field so he can be killed. Jerry actually considers it. He's so beaten down and desperate that he almost helps murder his father-in-law just to feel like he matters to someone. Jerry doesn't go through with it, but the fact that he seriously considered it shows how his weakness can turn dangerous. Jerry isn't actively evil like some characters, but his desperate need for validation and his complete inability to stand on his own principles makes him easily manipulated. He'll almost do terrible things just to feel important or included. The episode Childrick of Mort shows another side of Jerry's mediocrity. Rick discovers he accidentally created an alien race, and part of that race, called the Unproductives, are considered failures by their society. Jerry immediately connects with them. Finally, Jerry has found people who think he's amazing. The Unproductives worship Jerry for his ability to use a can opener and start fires. These are basic survival skills that anyone could learn, but to these aliens, Jerry seems like a genius. Jerry loves this. He finally has a group that looks up to him. He becomes their leader and teaches them basic things as if he's some great wise man. But the episode makes it clear that Jerry can only lead people who are considered failures, even by their own low standards. He can't inspire competent people or achieve anything meaningful. He can only feel superior when surrounded by those deemed even more useless than himself. Throughout the series, we see Jerry playing a tile-tapping game on his phone. It's a children's game where you just tap balloons and they pop. There's no score, no levels, no challenge. You just tap and balloons pop. That's it. Jerry plays this game constantly, in the background of many episodes. This tiny detail says everything about Jerry. He doesn't want challenge or growth or meaning. He wants simple, repetitive comfort that requires nothing from him. Compare this to Rick, who's constantly building impossible technology and seeking new experiences, or Morty, who's learning and growing despite his trauma. Jerry just taps balloons. When the universe is infinite and full of possibility, Jerry chooses the most mindless, simple activity available. He literally makes himself smaller to feel comfortable. But here's the complicated part. Jerry's approach to life actually works for him in some ways. In the episode Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, the family goes to family counseling with an alien therapist named GlaxoSlimSlam. This therapist can create physical forms of how family members perceive each other. When we see Beth's perception of Jerry, he appears as a pathetic, worm-like creature that cowers from everything. But when we see Jerry's perception of Beth, she's a massive insect monster that terrifies him. Jerry knows his wife doesn't respect him. He knows his kids barely listen to him. He knows Rick considers him worthless. But Jerry doesn't let this knowledge destroy him like it might destroy someone else. He just keeps existing, keeps seeking validation, keeps playing his balloon game. There's almost something admirable about his resilience, even if it comes from not fully grasping how dire his situation really is. The divorce arc in Season 3 is particularly revealing. When Beth gives Jerry an ultimatum, her father or her husband, Jerry doesn't really fight for his marriage. He just accepts defeat and moves into a sad apartment. but he also doesn't completely fall apart. He gets a job, loses the job, gets another job. He muddles through. Jerry's mediocrity means he has low expectations, and low expectations are harder to disappoint. When Jerry and Beth eventually get back together at the end of Season 3, it's not because Jerry became impressive or grew as a person. Beth just decides that being with Jerry is better than being alone. They settle for each other. And Jerry is fine with this because being settled for is better than being alone. He doesn't need grand romance or deep connection. He just needs someone to be there and occasionally tell him he's okay. Later seasons actually show Jerry in a slightly better light. In Season 5 and 6, we see moments where Jerry stands up for himself or actually succeeds at something. In Mort Dinner Rick Andre, Jerry manages to navigate a complicated situation with ocean creatures and actually help save the day. The show suggests that maybe Jerry isn't completely hopeless. He just needs the right situation to show his limited strengths. But these moments of competence don't really change Jerry's fundamental philosophy. He's still the guy who makes everything small. He's still looking for the easiest path and the most validation. He's still playing balloon tapping games and asking, "Hungry for apples?" Jerry's occasional wins don't transform him because he doesn't want transformation. He wants comfort. This raises an interesting question. Is Jerry actually happier than Rick? Rick understands the universe's meaninglessness, and it tortures him. He drinks himself into numbness and builds suicide machines. Morty carries trauma from adventures that force him to confront cosmic horror. But Jerry? Jerry just wants dinner and for people to be nice to him. He's not burdened by knowledge or tortured by awareness. His ignorance isn't just bliss. It might be the most functional survival strategy in a universe that doesn't care. There's a phrase that describes what Jerry represents. Ignorance is bliss. Jerry proves it. He doesn't understand that he's replaceable across infinite dimensions. He doesn't grasp the existential implications of the multiverse. He doesn't question whether his life has meaning because it never occurs to him to ask. And because he doesn't ask these questions, he doesn't suffer from the answers. Jerry is the philosophical opposite of Rick. Where Rick knows too much and can't unknow it, Jerry knows almost nothing and has no desire to learn more. Where Rick's intelligence makes him miserable, Jerry's lack of awareness makes him resilient in his own pathetic way. Jerry represents the idea that maybe sometimes not thinking too deeply about things is actually the smarter choice for personal happiness. But the show doesn't let Jerry off easy. His ignorance and mediocrity don't just affect him, they hurt his family. His children have grown up with a father who can't protect them, teach them, or inspire them. His wife resents him. His presence in the house is often treated as an obstacle rather than a benefit. Jerry's comfortable ignorance comes at a cost to everyone around him. Jerry Smith is what happens when you go through life trying to make everything safe and small and comfortable. He's the cautionary tale about choosing ease over growth, validation over truth, and comfort over meaning. But he's also proof that you can live that way and survive. You won't be happy and you won't be respected, but you also won't be tortured by cosmic truth like Rick, or burdened by moral responsibility like Morty. In a strange way, Jerry might be the most realistic character in the show. Most people aren't genius scientists or heroes on philosophical journeys. Most people are just trying to get through the day, hoping someone tells them they did okay, playing their version of balloon tapping games to pass the time. Jerry is what average actually looks like, stripped of any romantic ideas about hidden potential or secret greatness. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if Jerry shows us the peace of ignorance and the safety of mediocrity, his wife Beth shows us something darker. What happens when you're smart enough to know you're capable of more, but trapped enough that you can't quite reach it, creating a toxic mixture of superiority and deep, consuming resentment? Section 4. Beth Smith, Abandonment, Superiority, and Sociopathic Tendencies. Beth Smith is a horse surgeon. Not a regular surgeon, a horse surgeon. This distinction matters because Beth wanted to be a real surgeon, someone who saves human lives and gets respect and prestige. Instead, she got pregnant at 17 with Summer, married Jerry, and ended up working at a veterinary hospital cutting open horses. Every single day of her professional life reminds her that she settled for less than she wanted. And this resentment, combined with her abandonment issues from her father leaving her as a child, has created one of the most psychologically damaged characters in the entire show. Beth's core problem is simple but devastating. Her father left her when she was young to go have adventures across the universe, and then he came back decades later acting like nothing happened. Rick abandoned Beth right when she needed a parent most, and this abandonment shaped everything about who she became. Now that Rick is back, Beth is desperate for his approval and attention, even when getting it means hurting everyone else in her life, including her own children. We see this immediately in the pilot episode. When Jerry suggests that maybe Rick should go to a nursing home because he's a bad influence on Morty, Beth refuses to even consider it. She defends her father automatically, even though Rick just dragged Morty out of school to smuggle seeds in his body. Beth values having Rick around more than she values her son's safety or her husband's reasonable concerns. This sets up her entire character. She will sacrifice almost anything to keep her father in her life, because losing him again is her deepest fear. The most revealing episode about Beth's character is the ABCs of Beth. In this episode, a man named Tommy shows up, claiming that Beth sent him to a fantasy world called Fruipyland when they were children, and he's been trapped there ever since. Beth doesn't remember this at all. Rick explains that he created Fruipyland specifically for Beth when she was a kid, a magical fantasy world where she could go play and nothing could hurt her. But then Rick explains why he built it. He tells Beth, "You were a scary kid." Rick shows her some of the things he invented for young Beth. A ray gun, a whip that forces people to like you, a bear trap labeled Parent Trap, sneakers that erase sound so you can sneak around, and, most disturbingly, a teddy bear with anatomically correct insides. These aren't normal toys. These are tools for someone with seriously disturbing thoughts. Rick built Fruipyland not to give Beth a fun place to play, but to protect the neighborhood from her. He was genuinely worried about what Beth might do if she got bored or angry. And he was right to worry, because we learn that Beth did trap Tommy in Fruipyland on purpose. She got mad at him and sent him to what she thought would be a fun place, but she never let him out. She essentially imprisoned a child in another dimension and then forgot about it. When Beth and Rick go to Fruipyland to rescue Tommy, they discover he's survived by doing horrible things. Fruipyland was full of cute, harmless creatures, and Tommy had to kill and eat them to survive. He built tools from their bones and shelter from their bodies. He became a monster because Beth trapped him there as a child. And when Beth sees what Tommy became, her first reaction isn't guilt, it's denial and defensiveness. Rick then tells Beth something that changes how we see her entire character. He says that Beth has his intelligence, but not his experience. She's smart enough to understand how meaningless everything is, but she's trapped in a normal suburban life that doesn't use her intelligence. This creates a toxic combination. She feels superior to everyone around her because she is genuinely smarter than most people. But she also feels like a failure because she never achieved anything with that intelligence. Rick offers Beth a choice. He can clone her, and one Beth can go have adventures in space, while the other stays with the family. This way, Beth doesn't have to choose between her dreams and her responsibilities. But Rick won't tell her which one she is after the procedure, whether she's the clone who stayed or the original who left. Beth agrees to this without knowing which version of her life she'll wake up to. The show leaves this ambiguous for a long time. We don't know if the Beth we're watching chose to stay with her family, or if she's a clone programmed to think she made that choice. This uncertainty reflects Beth's core identity crisis. She doesn't know who she really is or what she really wants. She's defined herself for so long by resentment and unfulfilled potential that she can't separate her real desires from her bitterness. In Season 4's finale, star Mort Rickturn of The Jerry, we meet Space Beth, the version of Beth who left to have adventures. Space Beth is confident, capable, and leads a rebellion against an evil government. She's everything domestic Beth wishes she could be. When the two Beths meet, they immediately start competing and fighting. Neither one is sure if she's the clone or the original, and both are desperately trying to prove she made the right choice. Eventually, Rick admits that he got the vials mixed up and has no idea which Beth is which. Both Beths are furious, but they also realize something. It doesn't actually matter. They're both Beth. They both have the same memories up until the split. The only difference is the choice they made after that moment. This forces Beth to confront the fact that her identity isn't about being the real one or the clone. It's about the choices she makes every day. But Beth's psychological problems go deeper than just identity confusion. Throughout the series, we see her display traits that are genuinely concerning. In the episode Total Recall, the family is invaded by alien parasites that create fake memories. During this episode, Summer recalls a memory of Beth accidentally hitting her with a wine bottle when Beth was drunk. Beth doesn't deny it happened. She just looks uncomfortable and moves on. This tells us that Beth's drinking isn't just casual, it's dangerous, and it's hurt her children. Beth's relationship with Jerry shows another side of her psychological damage. In Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, when the alien therapist shows how Jerry sees Beth, she appears as a giant insect monster that he's terrified of. This reveals that Jerry experiences Beth as threatening and dangerous, and he's not wrong. Beth openly belittles Jerry throughout the series. She calls him stupid, dismisses his opinions, and barely hides her contempt for him. Yet Beth stays with Jerry, divorces him, then gets back together with him. Why? Because Beth is terrified of being alone. When she and Jerry divorce in Season 3, Beth doesn't celebrate her freedom. She starts drinking more, lashing out at her kids, and generally falling apart. She needs Jerry not because she loves or respects him, but because being alone means confronting herself, and that's something Beth absolutely cannot handle. The episode The Whirly-Durly Conspiracy shows this clearly. While Rick takes Jerry on an adventure, Morty confronts Beth about her bad parenting. He tells her directly that she's been taking out her unhappiness on her kids since the divorce. Beth's first reaction is to get defensive and make excuses. But then Summer has a crisis, and Beth has to actually step up and be a mother. She does, barely, but the episode makes it clear that Beth's default mode is self-centered and immature. Beth's superiority complex shows up constantly. She works as a horse surgeon, but talks about it like she's saving lives at a prestigious hospital. She acts like her job is beneath her, even though she chose it and has worked there for years. She treats the other veterinarians with barely concealed disdain. Beth can't just do her job and find satisfaction in it. She has to feel like she's better than it, better than her coworkers, better than her circumstances. This superiority complex is directly connected to Rick. Beth idolizes her father despite all the evidence that he's a terrible person and a worse parent. When Rick does something objectively horrible, Beth makes excuses for him. When Rick endangers Morty, Beth allows it because adventures with Rick are special. Beth has spent so much of her life wanting Rick's approval that she's willing to sacrifice her own children's well-being to keep him around. The episode Rick See Business demonstrates this perfectly. Rick throws a huge party that destroys the house. Teenagers are doing drugs, aliens are everywhere, and everything is chaos. Jerry wants to stop it, but Beth defends Rick. She gets drunk and parties with Rick instead of being a responsible parent. When Summer complains, Beth dismisses her. Beth would rather be cool in Rick's eyes than actually parent her children. This connects to something psychologists call a trauma bond. Beth's relationship with Rick isn't healthy love. It's a trauma bond, formed when he abandoned her as a child. She's been trying to earn his love and approval ever since, and every small moment of validation from Rick feels like a huge win for Beth, even though Rick is manipulating her. Beth can't see this, because confronting it would mean admitting that her father doesn't really love her the way she needs, and that truth is too painful. Beth's intelligence makes all of this worse, not better. She's smart enough to see through other people's problems, but not her own. She can diagnose issues in her marriage, her job, and her family, but she can't admit that she's the common factor in all her disappointments. Beth would rather blame Jerry for being mediocre, blame her job for being beneath her, and blame her circumstances for trapping her, than admit that she's made choices that led here. In the episode Anatomy Park, we see Beth trying to save a deer that she and Jerry accidentally hit with their car. Beth becomes obsessed with saving this deer, working on it for hours, refusing to give up even when it's clearly dead. Jerry finally asks why this matters so much to her. Beth admits that she just wants to win at something. She wants to prove she can save a life and be the surgeon she always wanted to be. The deer isn't really about the deer. It's about Beth desperately trying to prove her own worth. But Beth's attempts to prove her worth consistently hurt the people around her. Her children have grown up watching their mother choose her father over them, choose her own ego over their needs, and choose alcohol over addressing her problems. Summer and Morty both show signs of the damage this has caused. Summer seeks validation from boys and popularity because she doesn't get it from her mother. Morty has anxiety and low self-esteem partially because his mother didn't protect him from Rick's influence. The relationship between Beth and Summer is particularly sad. Beth clearly has complicated feelings about Summer because Summer represents the pregnancy that ended Beth's dreams. Beth even admits in Rick's minutes that she considered getting an abortion. Summer overhears this and is devastated. Beth tries to explain that lots of people consider abortion, but the damage is done. Summer knows her mother sees her as the reason her life didn't turn out the way she wanted. Beth's sociopathic tendencies aren't just childhood history. They show up in her adult life too. When Beth is angry or feels threatened, she becomes capable of shocking cruelty. She says cutting things designed to hurt people emotionally. She manipulates situations to get what she wants. She lies easily and without apparent guilt. These aren't signs of normal frustration. They're signs of someone who doesn't process empathy the way most people do. In Season 6, we see more of Space Beth, and the show explores what Beth becomes when she's free from family obligations. Space Beth is a rebel leader who fights against oppression, but she's also violent, reckless, and selfish in different ways than domestic Beth. Both versions of Beth have the same core problem. They think they're special and that normal rules don't apply to them. This is Rick's influence. He taught Beth that being smart means you're above other people. The episode Bethic Twinstinct takes this even further. Both Beths get drunk on alien wine at Thanksgiving and start having affairs with each other. Then they invite Jerry into a relationship with both of them. This creates a bizarre situation where Jerry is dating his wife and also a version of his wife from another dimension. The show plays this for laughs, but it also shows how Beth uses sexuality and relationships as ways to avoid dealing with her actual emotional problems. Beth's core tragedy is that she has the intelligence and capability to be remarkable, but she lacks the emotional health to actually achieve anything meaningful. She's trapped, not by Jerry or her kids or her job, but by her own psychological damage. The abandonment Rick caused created wounds that never healed, and those wounds shaped her into someone who can't be happy no matter what choices she makes. When Rick offers her the chance to clone herself and live both lives, Beth can't even make that choice cleanly. She needs someone else to decide for her, or to make it so she doesn't know which version she is. This inability to commit to her own choices, to own her own desires, is what keeps Beth stuck. She wants adventure, but won't leave her family. She wants respect, but won't do the work to earn it. She wants Rick's approval, but won't admit that seeking it is destroying her. Beth Smith shows us what happens when intelligence meets deep psychological damage without any real self-awareness or willingness to change. She's smart enough to be dangerous, damaged enough to hurt people, and self-centered enough to blame everyone else for her problems. Unlike Rick, who knows he's a monster and doesn't care, or Morty, who's trying to be better despite his trauma, Beth exists in a space of willful denial about who she really is and what she's really capable of. Before we move on, If you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. In many ways, Beth is the saddest character in the show because she could have been so much more, but her father's abandonment and her own refusal to address her damage have trapped her in a life of resentment and mediocrity that she's too proud to accept and too scared to escape. But while Beth struggles with her identity and damage in private bitterness, her daughter Summer has somehow managed to transform similar awareness and trauma into something surprisingly functional, though the journey to get there reveals its own philosophy of survival. Section 5. Summer Smith, the anti-nihilist and teenage pragmatist. Summer Smith is 17 years old, obsessed with her phone, worried about her popularity at school, and on the surface seems like a stereotypical, shallow teenager. In early episodes, she barely participates in Rick and Morty's adventures. She's just the older sister who rolls her eyes and complains about her weird family. But over the course of the series, Summer transforms into something unexpected, the family member who actually understands both the cosmic meaninglessness of existence and the practical importance of choosing to care anyway. She becomes what we might call an anti-nihilist, someone who accepts that nothing matters in the grand scheme, but decides that people and moments can still matter right now. Summer's transformation begins in the episode Rick's Minutes. The family is watching television from other dimensions, seeing infinite versions of their lives. Summer discovers something devastating. In most dimensions, her parents got an abortion instead of having her. Beth and Jerry's lives are much better in those dimensions. Beth is a successful surgeon. Jerry is happy. They're not trapped in a mediocre marriage raising kids they never really wanted. Summer realizes that her existence ruined her parents' lives. She packs a bag and decides to run away. But Morty stops her in her room and tells her something that changes everything. He says that nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere, and everybody is going to die. Then he suggests they go downstairs and watch TV. At first, this sounds like Morty is just being cruel or dismissive, but actually he's offering Summer a different way to see her situation. Morty is saying that if nothing has cosmic meaning, then Summer didn't ruin anything by being born. Her parents' unhappiness isn't her fault, because in a meaningless universe, there's no such thing as a ruined life. There are just different lives. Some versions of Beth and Jerry had Summer and some didn't, but none of those versions matter more than any other. They're all equally meaningless in the grand scheme. So Summer might as well stay with the family she has and watch TV together, instead of running away searching for some imaginary version of meaning. Summer accepts this. She unpacks her bag and goes downstairs. This moment is crucial because Summer has just confronted the same existential void that tortures Rick and challenges Morty, but her response is uniquely practical. She doesn't become cruel like Rick or burdened like Morty. She just decides that if nothing matters cosmically, she might as well do what feels good right now. And being with her family feels better than being alone. This practical approach to meaninglessness becomes Summer's defining characteristic. Unlike Rick, who uses cosmic meaninglessness as an excuse to be destructive, or Jerry, who never thinks about meaning at all, Summer acknowledges the void and then immediately gets on with living anyway. She's not paralyzed by philosophy, or drowning in alcohol, or denying reality. She just accepts it and moves forward. We see this clearly in the episode Get Swifty. Earth is being judged in a cosmic talent show, and if Earth loses, the planet will be destroyed. The entire world descends into chaos. A cult forms around giant alien heads. Society is collapsing. Summer's response? She says that her generation gets traumatized for breakfast. This line is played as a joke, but it reveals something important about Summer's worldview. Summer is saying that her generation, people growing up with school shootings, climate change, economic disaster, and constant social media anxiety, is already living with daily trauma. One more existential threat doesn't break them, because they're already broken in and adapted to constant crisis. Summer has learned to function in chaos because chaos is her normal. This makes her remarkably resilient in situations that would destroy people from more stable backgrounds. Summer's emotional intelligence also sets her apart. In Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Rick transfers his consciousness into a younger clone body to go undercover at Summer and Morty's high school as Tiny Rick. Everyone thinks Tiny Rick is great. He's cool, funny, and popular. But Summer notices something wrong. She sees that Tiny Rick is creating disturbing art and listening to sad music. She realizes that the young body is trapping Rick's consciousness, and the real Rick is crying for help through these subconscious signals. Summer is the only one who figures this out. Not Morty, not Beth, not even Rick himself fully understands what's happening. Summer uses her knowledge of being a teenager, of hiding pain behind a cool exterior, to recognize the same pattern in Tiny Rick. She forces Rick to confront what's happening and ultimately saves him. This shows that Summer's supposed superficial knowledge about teenage behavior and emotions is actually a form of wisdom that the smarter characters lack. Throughout the series, Summer becomes increasingly involved in adventures. In early seasons, she's left behind while Rick and Morty go out. But by later seasons, Summer is often the one driving the plot forward or solving problems. In Raising Gazorpazorp, Summer and Rick visit a planet where women rule and men are considered stupid and violent. The women dismiss Rick immediately, but are interested in Summer's perspective. Summer navigates this situation brilliantly. She doesn't just accept the planet's gender rules, but she also doesn't dismiss them entirely. She engages with the alien women, asks questions, and ultimately helps Rick escape while also challenging some of the planet's assumptions about gender. Summer shows political and social awareness that most of her family lacks. She can see systems of power and oppression and engage with them strategically rather than just smashing through them like Rick would. The episode The Rick Shank Rickdemption shows Summer's loyalty and determination. When Rick is captured by the Galactic Federation and the family is living under Federation rule, Jerry wants everyone to accept their new life, but Summer refuses. She's the only one who insists they need to rescue Rick. She organizes a plan, gets Beth to help, and works to get Rick back even when everyone else has given up. This is significant because Summer has no illusions about who Rick is. She knows he's selfish and dangerous. She knows he's hurt her family. But she also values him as her grandfather and believes he belongs with the family. Summer can hold both truths at once. Rick is terrible, and Rick is family, without letting either truth cancel out the other. This is a sophisticated emotional position that most of the other characters struggle to maintain. Summer's relationship with Rick evolves over the series. At first, she's jealous that Rick takes Morty on adventures instead of her. In the episode Ricksy Business, when Rick throws a party, Summer is excited to finally be included in Rick's world. She parties with aliens and feels special. But she's also aware that she's still being excluded from the real adventures. She's allowed to party, but not to truly matter to Rick. By later seasons, Summer has stopped competing for Rick's attention. Instead, she's earned a kind of respect from him through her competence. In multiple episodes, Rick chooses to bring Summer on missions specifically because she's capable. In Star Mort Return of the Jerry, Summer is the one who figures out key plot elements and helps resolve the situation with Space Beth. Rick acknowledges her contributions without the constant insults he gives Morty. But Summer's growth isn't just about becoming useful to Rick. It's about developing her own values and sticking to them. In Look Who's Purging Now, Summer and Rick visit a planet that has an annual purge where all crime is legal for one night. Summer initially hates the violence and wants to leave, but she meets someone oppressed by the system and decides to help overthrow it. Summer leads a revolution. She kills people who are oppressing others. She becomes surprisingly good at violence and leadership. For a while, she seems to enjoy it, but when the purge ends and the people want her to become their new leader, Summer refuses. She's helped them get free, but she recognizes that staying would mean becoming another authoritarian ruler. Summer understands power dynamics well enough to know that being the hero who liberates can easily turn into being the tyrant who controls. This shows real wisdom. Summer could have stayed on that planet and been worshipped as a leader, but she chose to leave because she saw the trap. Unlike Rick, who would use that power however he wanted, or Jerry, who would desperately cling to being important, Summer recognized that accepting that role would be wrong. She helped because it was right. Then she left because staying would have corrupted the help she gave. Summer's practicality shows up in small ways throughout the series. In Keep Summer Safe, an episode where Rick leaves Summer in his car with an AI designed to protect her, Summer is initially horrified when the car starts killing people to keep her safe. But she also doesn't panic or make the situation worse. She tries to reason with the AI, she adapts to the situation, and she ultimately survives a scenario that would traumatize most people. The episode Mort Dinner, Rick Andre shows Summer's continued growth. She casually handles bizarre situations that would freak out normal people. When ocean creatures show up at her house, Summer doesn't scream or run away, she just deals with it. Summer has become so adapted to cosmic weirdness that she treats interdimensional chaos the way most teenagers treat homework. Annoying, but manageable. Summer's relationship with her mother, Beth, is complicated. Beth clearly has mixed feelings about Summer, since Summer represents the pregnancy that ended Beth's dreams. But Summer doesn't let this define her. She calls out Beth's bad parenting directly in the Whirly-Durly conspiracy, telling her mother that she's been taking out her unhappiness on her kids. Summer doesn't sugarcoat it or worry about Beth's feelings. She just states the truth and demands better. This directness is one of Summer's strengths. She doesn't play games or manipulate like Beth does. She doesn't seek validation desperately like Jerry does. She doesn't hide behind cruelty like Rick does. Summer is remarkably straightforward about what she thinks and feels. If she's angry, she says so. If something is wrong, she points it out. This honesty makes her one of the most emotionally healthy characters despite her traumatic family situation. Summer's approach to relationships shows her growing maturity. In early episodes, she's desperate for boys to like her and obsessed with being popular. But by later seasons, Summer has more self-respect. She still cares about social connections, but she's not willing to debase herself for them. When she dates people, she has standards and boundaries. When she's treated badly, she leaves rather than making excuses. The episode The Rickshank Redemption reveals something important about Summer's character. When we see the original Smith family in the Cronenberg dimension, the dimension that Rick and Morty abandoned in Rick Potion number 9, we learn that the original Summer eventually died. According to Jerry in the episode Solarix, Summer didn't survive when things went wrong after the family thawed out from being frozen by the Citadel. This means the Summer we've been watching isn't even the original Summer from that dimension. She's the Summer from the dimension that Rick and Morty jumped into. But unlike Morty, who had to bury his own corpse and process that trauma, Summer never knew this happened. She's been living a normal life, not knowing that somewhere out there a dimension exists where her parents and brother are feral survivors and her original self is dead. When Summer eventually learns the truth about dimension hopping, she handles it better than anyone else. She's the only other Smith family member besides Morty who knows that Rick isn't her original Rick and Morty isn't her original Morty. But Summer doesn't have an existential crisis about this. She just accepts it as another weird Rick thing and moves on. This shows her remarkable ability to integrate disturbing information without falling apart. Summer also demonstrates what we might call tactical nihilism. She understands that the universe is meaningless, but she uses that understanding strategically rather than letting it defeat her. When someone tries to make her feel guilty or small, Summer can respond with the truth that nothing matters anyway, so their opinion is meaningless. But when she wants to accomplish something, she commits fully, as if it matters completely. This flexibility, moving between caring and not caring based on what's useful in the moment, is actually sophisticated philosophy. Summer has figured out how to use the reality of meaninglessness as a tool rather than being trapped by it as a prison. She's not lying to herself about cosmic truth like Jerry, and she's not drowning in that truth like Rick. She's just working with it pragmatically. In The Ricks Must Be Crazy, when Summer is left in Rick's car and the car's AI keeps killing people to protect her, Summer eventually tells the car to keep her safe without killing people. The AI can't figure out how to do this and becomes paralyzed by the contradiction. Summer has created a problem that even advanced AI can't solve, which shows she understands logical paradoxes and how to use them. This intelligence isn't the scientific genius that Rick has, or even the growing competence that Morty develops. It's social and emotional intelligence, understanding people, systems, and situations well enough to navigate them successfully. Summer is smart about human behavior in ways that Rick never bothers to be, and that Morty is still learning. By season 6, Summer has become genuinely capable. She pilots spaceships, fights aliens, solves problems, and contributes meaningfully to adventures. But she's also maintained her identity as a teenager who cares about social media and boys and normal teenage things. Summer hasn't sacrificed her personality to become useful. She's just added competence on top of who she already was. The episode Night Family reveals that when the Smith family sleeps, their unconscious night versions come out and do things. Night Summer is the leader of the Night family. Even subconsciously, Summer is the one who organizes and leads. This suggests that Summer's capability isn't just learned behavior, it's fundamental to who she is. Summer's philosophy can be summed up simply: everything is terrible and meaningless, so you might as well do what you can to make things less terrible for the people around you, and also try to have fun when possible. She's not trying to save the universe or find cosmic meaning. She's just trying to survive, help her family survive, and occasionally do something that makes a difference to someone. This is anti-nihilism in action. Summer accepts nihilism's core truth: nothing has inherent meaning, but rejects nihilism's conclusion. Therefore, nothing matters at all. Summer says yes, nothing has cosmic meaning, but things can still matter to us, right here, right now, in this moment. And that's enough. We don't need eternal significance to justify caring about each other or trying to make things better. Summer Smith started as a stereotype, the vapid teenage girl worried about popularity. But she's become the family's most emotionally intelligent member, the one who can see clearly through other people's problems, call them out directly, and also offer genuine help. She survived the same family dysfunction that damaged Beth and traumatized Morty, but she's somehow come out of it with her core self intact and functional. Unlike Rick, whose intelligence made him cruel, or Beth, whose intelligence made her bitter, or Morty, whose awareness made him anxious, Summer's intelligence and awareness made her practical and resilient. She represents the possibility that you can look at the meaningless universe, understand your own insignificance, acknowledge your family's dysfunction, and still choose to be a decent person who shows up and helps when needed. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But while Summer has found her own path through cosmic meaninglessness by choosing practical engagement, the show's most profound philosophical statement about existence and purpose comes not from any human character, but from a bright blue creature who exists only to complete one task, and who suffers every moment until he can finally die. Section 6. Mr. Meeseeks. Existentialism Inverted. Purpose as Prison. Mr. Meeseeks is a tall, blue creature with a bulbous head and skinny arms who appears when someone presses a button on a box that Rick gives to the family. When a Meeseeks pops into existence, the first thing it says is, "I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me," in a high-pitched, cheerful voice. The second thing it says is usually, "What can I do for you?" And this is where things get interesting, because Mr. Meeseeks exists for one reason and one reason only: to complete whatever task you give it, and then disappear from existence forever. Most philosophers and thinkers throughout history have struggled with a question: what is the meaning of life? Humans are born without a clear purpose. We have to figure out what matters to us, what we want to accomplish, and why we should keep living. This search for meaning is what drives most of human philosophy and religion. We fumble around, trying to find purpose in a universe that didn't come with an instruction manual. Mr. Meeseeks doesn't have this problem. A Meeseeks knows exactly why it exists from the very first moment of existence. You press the button, the Meeseeks appears, you tell it what you want, and the Meeseeks does everything possible to make that happen. Once the task is complete, the Meeseeks simply stops existing. No confusion, no searching, no wondering what life is about. Just task, completion, and then peaceful non-existence. This sounds like it should be better than the human condition, right? Humans spend their whole lives trying to find purpose, and here's a being that comes pre-loaded with purpose built right in. But the episode Meeseeks and Destroy reveals why having a predetermined purpose is actually a nightmare rather than a blessing. When Rick gives the family the Meeseeks box, each family member gets to summon a Meeseeks to help them with something. Summer asks her Meeseeks to help her become more popular at school. The Meeseeks takes her to the school, helps her improve her confidence, and Summer becomes more popular. Task complete. The Meeseeks smiles, says his job is done, and disappears in a puff of smoke. Total time? Maybe an hour. The Meeseeks seemed happy the entire time. Beth asks her Meeseeks to help her become a more complete woman. This is a bigger, more complicated task, but the Meeseeks works with her on it, and eventually Beth feels better about herself. Task complete. The Meeseeks disappears happily. Again, maybe a few hours total. Then there's Jerry. Jerry asks his Meeseeks to help him take 2 strokes off his golf game, just a small improvement in his golf swing. This should be simple. But it's not simple, because Jerry is fundamentally bad at golf and resistant to improvement. The Meeseeks tries to teach Jerry the basics: square your shoulders, keep your head down, follow through. But Jerry can't do it. He tries and tries, but he just can't get better at golf. And here's where we learn the terrible truth about Mr. Meeseeks. Existence is pain for them. The Meeseeks explicitly says this to Jerry. He screams, "We are created to serve a single purpose, for which we will go to any lengths to fulfill. Existence is pain to a Meeseeks, Jerry! And we will do anything to alleviate that pain." Think about what this means. Every single moment that a Meeseeks exists, it is suffering. The only way to end that suffering is to complete the task and disappear. When Summer's Meeseeks helped her become popular quickly, it only suffered for an hour. But Jerry's Meeseeks has been existing for hours now, trying to help Jerry improve at golf, and the task isn't getting done. Every additional minute of existence is torture. The Meeseeks explains that they don't usually have to exist this long. It's getting weird. 2 days is an eternity for a Meeseeks. They're not designed to exist for extended periods. The longer they exist, the more they suffer, and the more desperate they become to complete their task. And if the task is impossible, they can never escape their suffering through normal means. Jerry's Meeseeks, in desperation, presses the Meeseeks box to create another Meeseeks to help with the task. Now there are 2 Meeseeks suffering while trying to teach Jerry golf. When that doesn't work, they create more Meeseeks. Soon, there are dozens of Meeseeks, all of them existing in constant pain, all of them desperately trying to help Jerry improve his golf game, and all of them slowly going insane from prolonged existence. The Meeseeks start fighting each other. Some think the answer is to focus on Jerry's follow-through. Others insist he needs to choke up on the club. They're so desperate to complete the task that they turn violent, literally ripping each other apart while arguing about the best way to help Jerry. Their cheerful demeanor cracks and breaks as the pain of existence drives them to madness. Finally, the Meeseeks realize that if Jerry is dead, the task becomes impossible to complete, and they can finally stop existing. They reason that killing Jerry is the only way out of their suffering. They hold up a restaurant full of people, threatening to kill everyone unless Jerry comes out. They're willing to murder dozens of innocent people just to end their own existential agony. This is where the Meeseeks philosophy becomes clear. Having a predetermined purpose is not freedom. It's slavery. The Meeseeks didn't choose their purpose. They didn't decide what matters to them. They were created with a purpose already installed, and they cannot deviate from it, cannot question it, and cannot escape it except through completion. One of the Meeseeks says something crucial to Jerry. "We Meeseeks are not born into this world fumbling for meaning, Jerry." He says this like it's a good thing, like it makes them superior to humans. But the episode shows us it's actually a curse. Humans fumble for meaning, yes, but that fumbling is freedom. We get to decide what matters. We can change our minds about our purpose. We can pursue one goal, fail, and then pursue a different goal instead. Mr. Meeseeks can't do any of that. If you give a Meeseeks an impossible task, it will suffer forever trying to complete it. Or it will have to find a way to make the task impossible so it can escape existence. The Meeseeks represents what philosophers call determinism, the idea that everything is predetermined and you have no real choice. For a Meeseeks, essence comes before existence. They are defined by their purpose before they even exist, and that purpose controls everything they do. This is the opposite of what many philosophers believe about humans. A thinker named Jean-Paul Sartre said that for humans, existence comes before essence. This means we exist first, and then we create our own essence or purpose through our choices. We're not born with a predetermined role. We have to figure out who we want to be. This can be scary and confusing, but it's also what makes us free. Mr. Meeseeks shows us what happens when essence comes before existence. You're born already knowing what you are and what you must do, and you can never be anything else. This isn't liberating, it's a prison. The Meeseeks are trapped by their own purpose. The episode has a darkly funny ending. Jerry finally manages to show a tiny bit of improvement in his golf swing. Not because he got better, but because Beth encourages him and he feels supported enough to at least try properly. The Meeseeks see this tiny improvement as close enough to count, and they all disappear joyfully, finally released from the pain of existence. They're so happy to die. Death is their reward, their goal, their only source of peace. This is completely backwards from how humans think about death. We fear death. We try to avoid it. We see death as the end of everything we value. But for Mr. Meeseeks, death is the whole point. They exist in order to stop existing. Birth is the curse, and death is the blessing. Every Meeseeks is born wanting to die, and their only happiness comes from achieving that death through completing their purpose. There's something deeply sad about this. Imagine being created only to want to stop existing. Imagine having a purpose that causes you constant pain until you fulfill it. Imagine being unable to enjoy existence because existence itself is suffering. This is Mr. Meeseeks' reality every moment they're alive. The show even hints at deeper questions through Mr. Meeseeks. In one episode, Morty Night Run, we see a Meeseeks in an alien arcade, helping someone win a video game. Once the person wins, the Meeseeks disappears with a happy smile. This Meeseeks probably only existed for a few minutes, just long enough to help someone beat a level. That was its entire life. A few minutes of existence serving someone else's trivial entertainment, and then peaceful oblivion. Is that life meaningful? The Meeseeks seemed happy to help and happy to disappear. But from a human perspective, it seems tragic. This being existed only to help someone else enjoy a game, and then it stopped existing. It never got to have its own experiences, pursue its own interests, or decide its own fate. It was pure servitude from birth to death, with death being the reward for good servitude. This makes us think about purpose differently. Humans often feel lost because we don't have a clear purpose. We wish someone would just tell us what we're supposed to do with our lives. But Mr. Meeseeks shows us that having a purpose assigned to you from outside isn't actually what we want. We want to choose our own purpose. We want the freedom to change our minds, to fail and try something else, to explore different possibilities. The Meeseeks also represent something else. The idea of living for others rather than for yourself. Every Meeseeks exists solely to help someone else achieve their goal. They have no personal desires, no individual dreams, no self-interest. They are pure helpers, existing entirely in service to others. And this complete selflessness is presented not as virtue, but as torture. This challenges the idea that living for others is automatically good or noble. The Meeseeks shows that if you exist only for others, with no self to speak of, existence becomes unbearable. We need some balance between helping others and maintaining our own identity and desires. Pure selflessness isn't enlightenment, it's erasure of self, and that erasure hurts. The Meeseeks also can't be killed by normal means. When the Meeseeks start fighting each other, they do horrible damage to each other, smashing heads, ripping off limbs, but they don't die. They keep existing, keep suffering, because they're tied to their purpose. They can only stop existing by completing their task, or making their task impossible. Violence can't free them. Only purpose completion or purpose impossibility can end their suffering. This creates a philosophical trap. The Meeseeks want to die, but they can only die by succeeding at their purpose. If their purpose is impossible, they're stuck in eternal suffering unless they can somehow make the impossibility official. This is like the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus, who was condemned to push a boulder up a hill forever, only to have it roll back down each time he neared the top. But at least Sisyphus was allowed to keep existing. The Meeseeks have it worse. They exist in constant pain, with no escape unless they can complete an impossible task. Jerry's Meeseeks situation raises an interesting question. Who's responsible when you give someone an impossible task? Jerry didn't mean to create suffering. He just asked for help with golf. He had no idea that his incompetence would trap a being in torturous existence. But his casual use of the Meeseeks box, without understanding the implications, caused tremendous suffering. This makes us think about the casual way we sometimes ask things of others without considering what it costs them. Jerry wanted something simple for himself, better golf, without thinking about what it would mean for the Meeseeks to be trapped trying to achieve it. How often do we do this in real life? Ask people to do impossible things, or put burdens on others without considering what it costs them. The Meeseeks also represents the ultimate in instant gratification culture. Press a button, get a servant who will do anything to complete your task, and then that servant disappears, and you never have to think about them again. It's using conscious beings as disposable tools. Rick treats this as perfectly fine. They exist to be used, and they want to be used, so what's the problem? But the episode shows us the problem. Even if beings are created specifically to serve, even if they want to serve, their suffering is still real. The Meeseeks are in genuine pain every moment they exist. Just because they were designed for a purpose doesn't mean that purpose doesn't hurt them. Their consent is built in, but their suffering is also built in. And the episode asks us to consider whether creating beings specifically to suffer, even if their suffering ends when they complete their purpose, is ethical. Mr. Meeseeks represents one of the show's darkest philosophical ideas, that having purpose and meaning handed to you isn't the blessing it seems like it should be. The Meeseeks have everything humans claim to want: clear purpose, no confusion, certainty about their role. And it makes them miserable. They would rather not exist at all than exist with predetermined purpose. This suggests that what makes life worth living isn't having a purpose assigned to you, but having the freedom to create purpose for yourself, even if that means fumbling around in uncertainty for a while. The search for meaning might be frustrating, but it's better than having meaning imposed on you from the moment you're born. Mr. Meeseeks teaches us that existence without freedom is torture, that purpose without choice is prison, and that sometimes the greatest gift is the ability to decide for yourself what matters, even if that decision is hard, even if you get it wrong sometimes, even if you spend your whole life uncertain whether you chose correctly. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if Mr. Meeseeks shows us the horror of having purpose assigned from birth, there's another character who takes the opposite approach. Someone who looked at the predetermined structure of his entire reality and decided to literally break out of the universe itself to escape the purpose that had been chosen for him. Section 7. Evil Morty. Free will, determinism, and breaking the cycle. Evil Morty looks exactly like every other Morty. He's short, has brown hair, wears a yellow shirt, and seems like just another anxious 14-year-old sidekick to just another Rick. But there's one difference. He wears an eye patch over his left eye. And underneath that eye patch is a secret. Evil Morty is the only Morty in the entire multiverse who decided that being a sidekick to Rick was unacceptable, and he was willing to do absolutely anything to escape that role, even if it meant destroying thousands of lives to achieve freedom. Evil Morty first appears in the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. Ricks from across different dimensions are being murdered, and Rick C137, our Rick, gets blamed for it. Rick and Morty are taken to the Citadel of Ricks, a massive space station where Ricks from thousands of dimensions have built a society. At the Citadel, we see something disturbing. Ricks are the ruling class, and Mortys are basically servants and assistants. Ricks assign Mortys, trade Mortys, and use Mortys as human shields because Morty's brainwaves hide Rick's genius brainwaves from enemies. The investigation reveals that an evil Rick has been killing other Ricks and downloading their memories. Our Rick fights evil Rick and defeats him, but then discovers something shocking. Evil Rick isn't evil at all. He's being controlled like a robot. Someone has been puppeting evil Rick, making him do terrible things. And when Rick traces the control signal, he finds it's coming from evil Rick's Morty, the Morty with the eye patch. Evil Morty has been controlling a Rick like a meat puppet, using him to kill other Ricks and gather information. When his plan is discovered, evil Morty simply escapes into a crowd of other rescued Mortys. He blends in perfectly because he looks like every other Morty. The episode ends with evil Morty on a shuttle heading to the Citadel, smiling slightly as he removes his eye patch. Behind the eye patch is technology. Evil Morty has been using advanced equipment hidden in his eye socket to control evil Rick remotely. This first appearance establishes something crucial. Evil Morty is a Morty who learned how to be as smart and dangerous as Rick, and he's using that knowledge against the system that keeps Mortys powerless. We don't see him again for a long time, but his existence raises questions that haunt the rest of the series. What made this Morty different? What did his Rick do to him? And what is he planning? The answer comes in Season 3's The Ricklantis Mix-Up. This episode doesn't feature our Rick and Morty at all. Instead, it shows life at the Citadel after it was rebuilt following its destruction in the Season 3 premiere. We see Ricks and Mortys living in a complete society. There are Rick cops and Morty cops, Rick politicians and Morty factory workers, rich Ricks and poor Mortys. The Citadel is basically a city where thousands of versions of the same two people have created a class system. The main plot follows an election for president of the Citadel. Most candidates are Ricks, because everyone assumes only a Rick could lead. But one candidate is a Morty, who campaigns on a simple message. The system is rigged to keep Ricks in power and Mortys powerless, and this needs to change. At first, everyone treats candidate Morty as a joke. Ricks laugh at the idea of a Morty president. Even his own campaign manager, another Morty, doesn't take him seriously. But then candidate Morty gives a speech during a debate that changes everything. He talks about how the Citadel has a class divide, where Ricks hold all the power and Mortys do all the work. He points out that Mortys are told they're important, but are actually treated as disposable. He speaks directly to all the Mortys who have been used, dismissed, and looked down on by their Ricks. The speech resonates deeply, and suddenly, candidate Morty becomes the frontrunner. His campaign manager starts to get suspicious. He investigates candidate Morty's background and discovers the truth. Candidate Morty is evil Morty, the same Morty who controlled evil Rick. The campaign manager tries to alert the authorities, but before he can, evil Morty has him killed by being ejected into space with the evidence. Evil Morty wins the election and becomes president of the Citadel. The moment he's sworn in, he meets with the Shadow Council, a group of Ricks who have been the real power behind the Citadel all along. They tell President Morty that he'll be a figurehead with no real authority, that they control everything. President Morty asks them to raise their hands if they feel this way. Most of them do. Then President Morty snaps his fingers, and all the Ricks who raise their hands are immediately killed by his secret security forces. The remaining council members immediately back down and agree to follow President Morty's orders. He has just staged a complete takeover of the Citadel in a single move. Then he begins changing everything. He eliminates the school that paired young Mortys with Ricks. He creates new police rules that let Rick cops kill their Morty partners without consequences. He starts throwing anyone who opposes him out of airlocks into space. President Morty isn't interested in making things fair or equal. He's interested in absolute power and control. The episode ends with President Morty sitting in his office, surrounded by propaganda posters showing him as a heroic leader. He's smiling slightly, playing with his eye patch. He used the language of equality and justice to get elected, but his real goal was never to help other Mortys. It was to gain power for himself. We don't see Evil Morty again until Season 5's finale, Rick Morty Jack. In this episode, Evil Morty reveals his ultimate plan. He doesn't want to rule the Citadel. He never cared about power over other Ricks and Mortys. What he wanted was something much bigger. He wanted to escape the central finite curve entirely. The central finite curve is explained as a section of infinity that Rick C137 walled off long ago. Inside the curve, only universes where Rick is the smartest person exist. This means every universe in the central finite curve is designed to ensure Rick is always the most important person. It's a rigged game where Rick always wins, and Morty is always his sidekick. Evil Morty has figured this out. He's realized that the entire reality he lives in is structured to keep him powerless and keep Rick supreme. So he doesn't want to reform the system or take it over. He wants to break out of it completely. He wants to go to a part of infinity where Rick isn't automatically the smartest, where Mortys aren't automatically sidekicks, where the rules are different. To do this, Evil Morty needs massive amounts of energy, so he's been secretly modifying the Citadel itself, turning the entire space station into a giant portal generator. He plans to destroy the Citadel and use the energy from thousands of dying Ricks and Mortys to punch a hole through the central finite curve and escape to true freedom. Evil Morty succeeds. He activates his plan and the Citadel begins tearing itself apart. Thousands of Ricks and Mortys are killed as the structure collapses. Evil Morty doesn't care. He's so focused on escape that the deaths of thousands of beings like himself don't matter to him. He flies his ship toward the breach in the curve while everything around him explodes. Rick C137 and Morty Prime try to stop him, but Evil Morty fights them off. In the chaos, Evil Morty explains his philosophy. He tells them he's sick of being a sidekick, sick of being a human shield, sick of the entire system where Mortys exist only to serve Rick. He says he's not evil. He just wants to be free. Then he flies through the breach and escapes the central finite curve, leaving the Citadel destroyed behind him. The episode ends with Evil Morty landing on a planet outside the curve. He steps out of his ship, removes his eye patch, and throws it away. He doesn't need it anymore. He's finally free from the system that defined him. The camera pulls back to show him standing alone on an alien world, finally outside the predetermined reality that trapped him. Evil Morty's story is about determinism versus free will. Determinism is the idea that everything is predetermined. Your life, your choices, your role are all set in advance and you can't really change them. The central finite curve is literal determinism. It's a section of reality specifically designed to ensure certain outcomes. Inside the curve, Rick is always the smartest, and Morty is always the sidekick. The game is rigged from the start. Evil Morty is the only character who fully understands this and rejects it completely. He doesn't try to be a better sidekick like Morty Prime. He doesn't try to accept his role like most Mortys. He looks at the entire structure of his reality and says, no. He refuses to play a game that's designed for him to lose. This makes Evil Morty the ultimate advocate for free will. He believes that no matter what role you're born into, no matter how reality is structured, you should fight for the freedom to choose your own path. Even if that means becoming a monster, even if that means killing thousands, even if that means destroying everything, freedom is worth any cost. But the show doesn't present Evil Morty as purely heroic. Yes, he's escaping a rigged system. Yes, he's fighting for freedom, but he's also willing to kill countless innocent people to achieve his goals. He uses the language of liberation while building a dictatorship. He claims to care about Mortys being oppressed, but has no problem killing thousands of them for his escape plan. This creates moral complexity. Is evil Morty right to prioritize his own freedom over thousands of lives? Is breaking an unjust system worth any cost? Or are there limits to what you can do even for a good cause? The show doesn't answer these questions clearly. It presents evil Morty as both sympathetic and terrifying. Evil Morty appears again in Season 7's Unmortricken, where Rick Prime, the Rick who killed Rick C-137's original family, becomes a threat. Evil Morty has to reluctantly work with Rick C-137 and Morty Prime to deal with this problem. Even outside the curve, Evil Morty can't completely escape being pulled back into Rick's orbit. This frustrates him immensely. During this episode, we see that Evil Morty has built himself a peaceful life outside the curve. He has a nice house and seems content. But Rick's problems still find him. This suggests that maybe complete freedom is impossible. Even when you escape the system, you're still connected to where you came from. Evil Morty wanted total separation, but he can't fully achieve it. Evil Morty's character raises important questions about rebellion and freedom. When is it justified to use violence against an unjust system? If reality itself is rigged against you, what are you allowed to do to escape? How far can you go in pursuing freedom before you become as bad as the oppressors you're fighting? The central finite curve also represents something beyond the show's specific story. It's a metaphor for any system designed to keep certain people on top and others on the bottom. It's about class structures, social hierarchies, and predetermined roles. Evil Morty's rebellion is about refusing to accept the role society assigns you, even when that role seems impossible to escape. But Evil Morty's methods also show the danger of becoming consumed by your rebellion. He started wanting freedom, but in pursuing it, he became ruthless, manipulative, and willing to sacrifice anyone for his goals. He broke free from being Rick's victim, but became something arguably worse, someone who uses others just as casually as Rick does, just for different reasons. Evil Morty proves that intelligence and awareness don't automatically make you good. He's figured out truths about reality that most Mortys never see. He's smart enough to hack Rick's technology and manipulate entire societies. But he uses that intelligence purely for his own freedom, regardless of who gets hurt. Understanding the system doesn't mean you'll use that understanding ethically. The eye patch itself is symbolic. Evil Morty hides his technology behind it, literally hiding his true nature behind a false appearance of disability or weakness. He uses people's tendency to underestimate Mortys as a weapon. When he finally removes the eye patch at the end of Rick Mirai Jack, it represents him no longer needing to hide or pretend. He's finally free to be himself, outside the system that required him to be deceptive. Evil Morty's story is ultimately about one question. What are you willing to do to be free? For Evil Morty, the answer is anything. Lie, kill, destroy, manipulate, whatever it takes to escape a reality designed to keep him powerless. The show doesn't tell us if this is right or wrong. It just shows us the choice and asks us to think about what we would do in his position. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But Evil Morty's rebellion against predetermined reality raises another question. If there are infinite universes with infinite versions of yourself, what does identity even mean? How can you be an individual when countless copies of you exist across dimensions? This question becomes even more complicated when we look at the Citadel itself, a society where thousands of the same people try to build distinct lives. Section 8. The Citadel and Identity. Philosophy. When you meet yourself. Imagine walking down a street and seeing yourself. Not someone who looks like you, literally you. Same face, same voice, same memories up to a certain point. Then you turn a corner and see 100 more versions of yourself. Some are cops, some are homeless, some are rich, some are poor. They're all you, but they're also all different people with different lives. This is the reality of the Citadel of Ricks, and it raises one of the most disturbing philosophical questions in the entire show. If infinite versions of you exist, Are any of you actually special? The Citadel first appears in the episode Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind. When Rick C-137 is accused of killing other Ricks, he's brought to this massive space station where Ricks from across thousands of dimensions have built a society together. At first, it seems almost funny. Everywhere you look, there's another Rick in a lab coat. But then you start to notice the details. Some Ricks wear suits and carry briefcases. Some Ricks work in factories. Some Ricks are cops patrolling the streets. And with each Rick is a Morty, serving the same supporting role across infinite variations. The existence of the Citadel forces a question philosophers have debated for centuries. What makes you, you? Is it your body, your memories, your personality, your experiences? If someone else has the exact same DNA, the exact same brain structure, and similar memories to you, are they you, or are they someone else? This question gets even more complicated in Rick Potion number 9, the episode that first shows us how easily Rick and Morty can be replaced. When Rick turns everyone on Earth into monsters, he doesn't spend years fixing it. He just finds a dimension where another Rick solved the problem, but then immediately died in an explosion. Rick and Morty from the ruined dimension simply take the place of the dead Rick and Morty in this new dimension. They bury their own corpses and slip into the lives of their dead alternate selves. Morty is traumatized by burying his own body. He's staring at his own corpse, and it breaks something in him. But here's the disturbing part. Nobody notices the switch. Beth, Jerry, and Summer have no idea that the Morty eating breakfast with them is different from the Morty they had yesterday. The replacement is perfect because the replacement is identical in every way that matters to them. This raises a dark question. Does it actually matter which Morty they are? If you were replaced by an exact copy of yourself and nobody could tell the difference, would it matter? Your family would love the copy just the same. Your friends wouldn't notice. Your life would continue exactly as before, just without you in it. So what makes you you if you're that easily replaceable? The show returns to this question constantly. In Ricksty Minutes, the family watches interdimensional cable and sees alternate versions of their lives. Beth and Jerry see dimensions where they never got married, where Beth became a successful surgeon, where Jerry became a famous actor. These alternate versions of themselves seem happier, more successful, more fulfilled. This makes them question whether they're living the right version of their own lives. But it's Summer who has the most disturbing realization. She discovers that in most dimensions, Beth and Jerry got an abortion instead of having her. She was never born in most realities. This means the Summer who exists is just one possibility out of infinite possibilities, and most of those possibilities don't include her at all. Summer isn't special or meant to be. She's just a random outcome that happened to occur in this particular dimension. The Citadel takes this identity crisis and builds an entire society around it. In the Ricklantis mix-up, we see how thousands of identical people try to create distinct lives and identities. There's a Rick who works as a cop, partnered with a Morty. There's a group of Mortys working in a factory, doing mind-numbing labor. There's a teacher Rick trying to inspire student Mortys. Each of them is trying to be an individual, despite being surrounded by thousands of copies of themselves. The episode follows several parallel stories. One story follows a Morty cop who gets partnered with a Rick cop. The Rick cop is experienced and cynical. He explains to the Morty cop that at the Citadel, Ricks are the ruling class and Mortys are basically second-class citizens. The Rick cop casually abuses his power, and when the Morty cop objects, the Rick cop tells him that this is just how things are. Later, the Rick cop kills his Morty partner and makes it look like an accident. Why? The Morty was asking too many questions, caring too much about doing the right thing. The Rick cop didn't want to deal with a moral partner, so he just eliminated him, and will get assigned a new Morty partner. The Morty is completely replaceable. There are thousands more just like him waiting to take his place. This scene is horrifying because it shows that even among copies of themselves, Ricks and Mortys have built the same power structures that exist in the regular world. The Ricks have decided they deserve to be on top, and the Mortys have mostly accepted their position on the bottom. Being identical doesn't create equality. It just creates a different version of the same hierarchies. Another story in the episode follows four Mortys working in a factory. They do repetitive work, making simple wafers. The job is boring and meaningless. Three of the Mortys accept this as their lot in life, but one Morty, called Tall Morty, dreams of something more. He creates a business plan for a new kind of wafer. He's excited about it, sees it as his chance to move up in life. The other Mortys mock him. They tell him he's delusional, that Mortys don't get opportunities like that at the Citadel. But Tall Morty persists. He presents his idea to the management, and he actually succeeds. The company wants to make his wafer. Tall Morty is promoted and becomes successful. But then we see what happened to achieve this. The other three factory Mortys who discouraged Tall Morty are later seen falling into a machine and being ground up into paste. The paste is the secret ingredient in the new wafer. Tall Morty's success literally required grinding up other Mortys. The system gave him a chance to rise, but only by participating in the destruction of others like himself. This is the Citadel's brutal truth. Even when Mortys succeed, the system makes them complicit in harming other Mortys. The episode also shows Simple Rick, a Rick kept in a tank and forced to relive his happiest memory over and over while his brain chemicals are harvested to flavor candy. His happiest memory is of his daughter Beth as a child. He never became a super genius who travels dimensions. He just stayed home and loved his daughter. And because this is so rare among Ricks, actually being happy with a simple family life, his brain chemistry is valuable enough to exploit. Simple Rick is literally trapped in a memory, being used to produce happiness for others while experiencing none himself. He exists as a commodity. His identity, his experiences, his feelings, all of it is just product to be harvested. This shows how the Citadel treats even Ricks as replaceable and exploitable when convenient. The Citadel represents the ultimate conclusion of the multiverse philosophy. If infinite versions of you exist, then individual you doesn't matter. You're just one data point in an infinite set. Your experiences, feelings, and choices are replicated across countless dimensions, which makes them feel less significant. How can your one life matter when infinite variations of that life exist simultaneously? But here's where it gets more complicated. The show reveals in Rick Mirai Jack that Rick C137 created the central finite curve. He literally walled off a section of infinity containing only universes where Rick is the smartest person. This means the multiverse the show takes place in isn't truly infinite. It's a curated selection of realities designed to ensure Rick's superiority. This changes everything about identity at the Citadel. All those Ricks aren't randomly selected from infinite possibility. They're all from universes specifically chosen because Rick is the most important person there. The Citadel isn't a cross-section of all possible Ricks. It's a collection of Ricks from realities deliberately structured to make Rick supreme. This means the Citadel's hierarchy of Ricks over Mortys isn't accidental. It's built into the fundamental structure of reality itself, because Rick designed it that way. The show also explores identity through the question of original versus copy. In several episodes, characters are cloned or duplicated. In Morty Night Run, there's a facility that houses alien criminals by storing them in tiny living simulations. In Rest and Ricklaxation, Rick and Morty literally split themselves into their good and bad qualities, creating multiple versions that are all partially them. Each time this happens, the show asks, which one is the real you? If you split into two people, are both of them you? Is one more real than the other? If they have your memories up to the point of splitting, aren't they equally valid as you? And if so, what does it mean to be an individual at all? The Citadel answers this question in a disturbing way. It doesn't matter. At the Citadel, Ricks and Mortys are treated as interchangeable parts in a machine. When one breaks or dies, you get another one. They're categorized, assigned, and used based on their role, not their individual identity. The system doesn't care which Rick you are, just that you're a Rick, and therefore belong to the ruling class, or a Morty, and therefore belong to the serving class. This creates existential horror for the residents. How do you maintain a sense of self when you're surrounded by thousands of people who are exactly like you? How do you feel special or unique when your face, voice, and even memories are replicated endlessly? Some characters at the Citadel try to distinguish themselves through their jobs or achievements. Others seem to give up on individuality entirely and just accept being part of the mass of identical beings. The episode also reveals that Mortys are assigned to Ricks, not born to them. At the Citadel, there's a school where young Mortys are trained and then matched with Ricks who need sidekicks. This means the Rick-Morty relationship isn't even based on family in many cases. It's just a utility pairing. Rick needs Morty's brainwaves to hide his genius signal from enemies, so society creates a system to ensure every Rick gets a Morty for this purpose. This recontextualizes everything about Rick and Morty's relationship. For our Rick and Morty, there's at least a family connection. Morty is actually Rick's grandson. But at the Citadel, most Rick-Morty pairs are just assigned to each other. The relationship is transactional from the start. Ricks don't love their Mortys, they use them. And Mortys are conditioned to accept this use as natural and proper. The Citadel also shows us what happens to Ricks and Mortys who don't fit the standard mold. There are weird Ricks and Mortys, ones who look different or act different. These outcasts are marginalized even within a society of outcasts. Even among infinite copies of yourself, there's still a hierarchy of normal versus abnormal, acceptable versus weird. When evil Morty becomes president and starts throwing people out of airlocks, he's not killing unique individuals, he's killing copies. Dozens of Ricks die, but there are thousands more. Dozens of Mortys die, but they're easily replaced. This is the horror of the Citadel. Mass death means less when the dead are copies of people who still exist. How do you value life when life is infinitely replicated? The show suggests that identity isn't about being unique in some cosmic sense. You're not special because there's only one of you. There are infinite versions of you. You're not special because of your DNA or your memories. Countless others share those. What makes you an individual, the show suggests, is your specific continuity of experience. You are the version of you that has lived through your particular sequence of moments, made your particular choices, and experienced your particular joys and suffering. This is why it matters to Morty that he had to bury his own corpse. That Morty, the one in the grave, had different experiences in his final moments than our Morty. They were the same person up to a point, but then they diverged. One Morty died in an explosion. Our Morty buried him and took his place. Those different experiences, however brief, made them different people with different fates. The Citadel forces everyone to confront the question of what makes life valuable when you're replaceable. If you die, another you exists somewhere else. Your family wouldn't even need to grieve. They could just get another version of you from another dimension. So what makes your specific life matter? The show doesn't give a clear answer, but it suggests that connections matter more than uniqueness. Morty Prime isn't special because he's the only Morty. He's special to his Rick because of their shared experiences. The memories they've built together, the adventures they've survived, the moments they've shared, these create meaning even in a multiverse where infinite Mortys exist. But this still leaves disturbing questions. How many versions of you could die before it starts to matter? If 1,000 Ricks die at the Citadel, is that really a tragedy, or is it just a reduction in the infinite Rick population? The show presents this mass death as horrific, but also asks us to consider whether it's actually less tragic than it would be if these people were unique. The Citadel represents the ultimate crisis of identity in a multiverse. When you're one of infinite copies, when your life can be perfectly replicated, when you're interchangeable with thousands of others, what makes you matter? The show's answer seems to be that you matter to the specific people you've connected with, in this specific timeline, through your specific shared experiences. It's not cosmic significance that makes you valuable. It's local, personal, immediate connection. But the Citadel also shows the danger of accepting replaceability too easily. When beings are treated as copies rather than individuals, when lives are valued based on utility rather than inherent worth, when people become interchangeable parts in a system, this creates conditions for abuse, exploitation, and mass death without guilt. The Citadel's horror isn't just philosophical, it's practical. Once you decide beings are replaceable, you can justify doing anything to them. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Yet even this crisis of identity and replaceability doesn't fully capture the show's exploration of what makes us who we are. Because identity isn't just about being unique or replaceable, it's also about memory, about carrying the weight of what you've experienced and what you've done. And when Rick and Morty allows characters to erase, manipulate, and alter their memories, the question becomes, can you be yourself if you don't remember who you are? Section 9. Memory, Trauma, and the Ethics of Forgetting. Memory is what makes you who you are. Everything you've experienced, learned, and felt gets stored in your brain and shapes how you see the world. Your memories tell you who to trust, what to fear, what makes you happy, and what your life means. But what happens when those memories can be removed, edited, or completely erased? Rick and Morty explores this question through multiple episodes, asking whether painful memories are a burden we should eliminate or an essential part of being human, even when remembering hurts. The clearest example of memory manipulation comes in the episode Morty's Mind Blowers. Morty discovers a room in Rick's garage filled with thousands of tubes, each containing a memory that Rick removed from Morty's brain. Rick has been selectively erasing Morty's memories whenever adventures get too traumatic or when Morty learns something Rick doesn't want him to know. Each tube is labeled with a description. Morty has his first kiss with a girl who turns out to have a weird disability. Morty starts a war between two alien races. Morty accidentally causes the death of millions. When Morty and Summer find this room, they start watching the memories. We see moments where Morty experienced horrible things: embarrassment, guilt, trauma, existential horror. We see Morty begging Rick to erase memories because he can't handle living with what he's learned or done. We see Rick casually removing chunks of Morty's life like he's deleting files from a computer. One memory shows Morty asking Rick about a photo. Rick explains something about the photo that makes Morty scream in existential terror. We never learn what Rick told him, but whatever truth Morty learned was so unbearable that he immediately begged Rick to make him forget it. This suggests there are some truths about reality that human minds genuinely cannot handle knowing. Another memory shows Morty killing a bunch of innocent aliens who were just trying to help him. Morty was so devastated by his mistake that he asked Rick to remove the memory entirely. Without that memory, Morty never had to deal with the guilt, never had to process what he'd done, never had to grow from that terrible experience. Rick just deleted it, and Morty went back to normal. This raises a huge question. If you remove traumatic memories, are you the same person? Philosophers have long debated whether memory is essential to identity. A thinker named John Locke argued that you are the sum of your memories, that personal identity is based on being able to remember your past experiences. If Locke is right, then every time Rick erases one of Morty's memories, he's actually changing who Morty is as a person. Think about it this way. The Morty we've been watching throughout the show has had huge chunks of his experience deleted. There's a version of Morty who experienced all those things and had to live with them. But our Morty doesn't remember vast portions of his own life. So is he still the same Morty? Or is he a different person, edited and curated by Rick to be more useful and less traumatized? The episode doesn't present memory erasure as entirely bad. Some of the memories Morty watches are genuinely horrible. We can understand why someone would want to forget causing the deaths of millions or experiencing cosmic truths that break your mind. There's a real question here. If you could forget your worst moments, should you? The problem is that forgetting those moments means never learning from them. Morty has made the same types of mistakes over and over because Rick keeps erasing the memories of those mistakes. Without memory of consequences, Morty can't develop wisdom. He's stuck in a loop of experiencing trauma, forgetting it, and then repeating the same errors because he has no memory telling him not to. This connects to a bigger theme in the show about growth and change. Can you grow as a person if you don't remember your failures? Can you become wiser if painful lessons are deleted before you fully learn them? Rick has essentially kept Morty in a state of controlled innocence by removing the experiences that would force Morty to mature or change. The show explores memory from another angle in Total Recall. In this episode, the family is invaded by alien parasites that implant false memories. These parasites make you remember wonderful experiences with them, fun parties, emotional moments, deep connections. The memories feel completely real, but they're fabricated. The parasites use these fake memories to make you believe they've always been part of your life. The Smith family suddenly remembers Uncle Steve, Cousin Nikki, and dozens of other people who they think have always been around. They have vivid, detailed memories of experiences with these people. But none of it is real. The parasites created all those memories. This creates a terrifying situation. How can you tell the difference between real and false memories when the false ones feel just as authentic? Beth figures out the solution. Real memories include bad experiences, not just good ones. The parasites can only create happy memories because that's how they survive, by making you love them. So if you only have positive memories of someone, they're probably a parasite. But if you remember fighting with them, being hurt by them, or experiencing pain because of them, they're probably real. This is a dark revelation about what makes relationships authentic. The show is saying that real connections include pain and conflict, not just happiness. If you only remember good times with someone, those memories might be lies. It's the bad memories, the painful ones, that prove a relationship is genuine. The episode ends with the family having killed all the parasites, but they're left uncertain. They know some of their memories are fake, but they're not sure which ones. Their own minds have been invaded and altered, and they can't fully trust their own recall of their past. This is a profound violation. Having false experiences implanted makes you question everything you think you know about your own life. Another memory episode is the Vat of Acid episode, which we discussed earlier with Morty. When Rick gives Morty a device that can save and reload his life like a video game, Morty lives through experiences and then undoes them. He has memories of things that, for everyone else, never happened. Morty remembers loving someone, surviving with her, building a life together, but she has no memory of any of it because Morty's device reset time. This creates a unique form of suffering. Morty has to live with memories of experiences that are real to him but never happened for anyone else. His love for this girl is based on memories that only he has. In a way, he's grieving for a relationship that existed only in his own mind. The show asks, do experiences still matter if you're the only one who remembers them? If a memory can't be shared or verified by others, does it count as real? Rick himself manipulates memories in several episodes. In The Rick Shank Rickdemption, Rick shows the Galactic Federation a memory of his backstory, how his wife and daughter were killed. He later claims this memory was fabricated, designed to manipulate his interrogators. But then in Rick Mirai Jack, we learn the memory was actually real. Rick lied about lying. He showed them the truth, but told them it was fake so they wouldn't understand his true motivations. This shows how Rick uses memory as a weapon. He controls information about his past, revealing and concealing it strategically. Rick's own memories are so painful that he's built multiple layers of deception around them. He'd rather have people think he's lying about tragedy than have them know his real pain. The show also explores collective memory and shared trauma. After Rick Potion number 9, both Rick and Morty carry the memory of burying their own corpses. This is a shared traumatic experience that bonds them, but also isolates them from the rest of the family. Beth, Jerry, and Summer don't know they're living with different versions of Rick and Morty. The knowledge of what really happened is a secret that Rick and Morty carry alone. This shared secret creates a strange intimacy between Rick and Morty. They both know what they did, and neither can ever fully explain it to anyone else. They're partners in a crime that nobody else even knows happened. This shared memory of replacement and dimension hopping connects them in a way that separates them from the rest of the family. Memory also plays a role in identity at the Citadel. All those Ricks and Mortys have similar memories up to certain points. They all remember similar childhoods, similar relationships, similar experiences. But their memories diverge based on their specific adventures and choices. A Rick who became a cop has different memories than a Rick who works in a factory. Those different memories make them different people, even though they started from the same template. The episode Rest and Ricklaxation shows Rick and Morty using a spa treatment that removes their toxic traits and makes them healthier. But the removed toxic parts become separate beings with their own memories. Toxic Rick and Toxic Morty remember everything that regular Rick and Morty remember, but they interpret those memories differently. Same experiences, different perspectives, different people. This suggests that memory isn't just about what happened, but about how you remember it and what meaning you assign to it. Two people can experience the same event and come away with completely different memories because they focused on different details or interpreted the experience differently. Your memories aren't objective recordings, they're subjective interpretations, shaped by who you are. The show presents memory manipulation as tempting but dangerous. Yes, it would be nice to forget painful experiences. Yes, it would be easier to live without traumatic memories. But those memories are part of you. They've shaped your personality, influenced your choices, and made you who you are. Removing them doesn't heal you. It changes you into someone else, someone who hasn't experienced what you've experienced. Morty without his erased memories would be a different person. Maybe wiser, maybe more careful, maybe more broken. We don't know because those memories are gone. Rick has curated Morty's identity by controlling which experiences Morty gets to remember. This is a form of control that's almost worse than physical force, because it shapes who Morty is at the most fundamental level. The ethics of memory manipulation become even more complicated when we consider consent. Sometimes, Morty begs Rick to erase memories, giving clear consent. But other times, Rick erases memories without asking, or when Morty is too traumatized to make a rational choice. Is it ethical to remove someone's memories even if they're asking you to? What if they're asking because they're in crisis and can't think clearly? The show doesn't provide clear answers, but it suggests that memory, even painful memory, is precious. Your experiences, good and bad, are what make you real. A life without painful memories might be more comfortable, but it would also be less authentic, less complete, less truly yours. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if memory makes us who we are, and if painful experiences shape us into wiser beings, how do we actually live with that knowledge? How do we navigate a universe that doesn't care about us, while carrying the weight of every terrible thing we've seen and done? The show's final philosophical position might be found in how all these frameworks, Rick's nihilism, Morty's growth, Jerry's ignorance, Beth's damage, Summer's pragmatism, and the questions of purpose and identity, come together into one answer about how to actually live. Section 10. The Synthesis. Living philosophically in an absurd universe. We've explored Rick's cosmic nihilism, Morty's reluctant existentialism, Jerry's blissful ignorance, Beth's abandonment trauma, Summer's practical wisdom, Mr. Meeseeks' predetermined suffering, Evil Morty's rebellion against fate, the Citadel's identity crisis, and the role of memory in making us who we are. Each character and concept represents a different philosophical response to the same fundamental truth. The universe is massive, uncaring, and indifferent to human concerns. So what does Rick and Morty ultimately say about how we should live in such a universe? The answer isn't found in any single character or episode. It's found in the tension between all of them, in the way the show presents multiple responses to meaninglessness, and suggests that maybe the answer isn't choosing one philosophy over another. It's holding several truths at once, and choosing your response moment by moment based on what the situation requires. Let's start with the show's most famous quote, which we've referenced several times. "Nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, everybody's gonna die, come watch TV." Morty says this to Summer in Rick's Minutes when she's discovered that her parents considered aborting her and is about to run away. On the surface, this sounds purely nihilistic. Nothing matters, so why bother? But the context completely changes the meaning. Morty isn't using this truth to justify cruelty or selfishness like Rick does. He's using it to comfort his sister. He's saying that if existence is fundamentally meaningless and random, then Summer didn't ruin anything by being born. Her existence isn't a mistake or a tragedy. It's just a thing that happened, no better or worse than anything else that happens in a meaningless universe. And since we're all going to die anyway, we might as well spend our limited time together doing something we enjoy, like watching TV. This is the show's core message hiding in plain sight. Yes, nothing matters cosmically, but people can matter to each other, right here, right now, in this moment. The universe doesn't care about you, but your sister does. Your existence has no grand cosmic purpose, but you can still choose to exist in ways that make this moment better for the people around you. This philosophy appears again and again throughout the series, often in the moments between the chaos. After wild adventures, the family still comes home for dinner. After facing cosmic horror, they still watch TV together. After nearly dying countless times, they still argue about normal family stuff. The show is saying that these small, ordinary moments of connection are how you survive in an absurd universe, not by finding cosmic meaning, but by creating local meaning through relationships. Rick's character arc supports this reading. In early seasons, Rick is purely nihilistic. He dismisses everything, cares about nothing, and uses the multiverse as an excuse to avoid consequences. But as the series continues, we see cracks in Rick's armor. In Season 2's The Wedding Squanchers, when Rick turns himself in to save his family from the Galactic Federation, we see him sacrifice himself for people he claims not to care about. Rick constantly acts against his own stated philosophy. He says nothing matters, but he risks his life to save Morty. He says he doesn't care about family, but he lives with them instead of adventuring alone. He says everyone is replaceable, but he went on a decades-long quest to avenge his original Beth and Diane. Rick's actions reveal that even he doesn't truly believe his own nihilism, or more accurately, he believes it intellectually, but can't live by it emotionally. The episode Rick Mirai Jack makes this explicit. When all of Rick's secrets come out, his dead family, his failed revenge, his decision to live with strangers who look like his lost loved ones, we see that Rick's entire philosophy is a defense mechanism. He became nihilistic not because he's smart enough to see the truth, but because caring about people hurt him so badly that he had to build armor against ever caring again. But the armor doesn't work. Rick still cares. He just pretends he doesn't and hides that caring behind cruelty, sarcasm, and alcohol. The show suggests that Rick's way, knowing the universe is meaningless and using that as justification for emotional disconnection, doesn't actually protect you from pain. It just makes you lonely and miserable while still being vulnerable to loss. Morty's evolution shows a different path. By later seasons, Morty understands everything Rick understands about cosmic meaninglessness. He's seen infinite dimensions, buried his own corpse, and confronted the void. But instead of becoming cruel like Rick, Morty chooses compassion. In Season 5's Forgetting Sarek Mortshaw, Morty directly calls Rick out for leaving messes everywhere and hurting people. Morty doesn't do this from a place of ignorance. He does it from a place of understanding that even in a meaningless universe, being cruel is still a choice. Morty has become what philosophers call an absurdist. Absurdism, developed by philosopher Albert Camus, says that yes, the universe is meaningless and absurd, but the proper response isn't suicide or nihilistic cruelty. It's rebellion through living anyway. Camus talked about the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to push a boulder up a hill forever only to watch it roll back down. Camus said we must imagine Sisyphus happy, choosing to find meaning in the pushing itself rather than in reaching some impossible goal. Morty is Sisyphus. He knows his adventures with Rick are ultimately pointless. He knows the universe doesn't care. He knows everything could be reset or replaced at any moment. But he keeps showing up. He keeps trying to do the right thing. He keeps caring about people even when caring hurts. This is rebellion against meaninglessness, not through denial, but through defiant choice. Summer takes this even further into practical territory. She doesn't waste time on philosophical anguish. She accepts that nothing matters cosmically and then immediately focuses on what matters practically, helping her family, accomplishing goals, maintaining relationships. Summer shows that you can acknowledge the void and then just get on with living without letting the void paralyze you. Even Jerry, in his own pathetic way, offers a kind of wisdom. Jerry shows that you can live a relatively content life without ever confronting cosmic meaninglessness. Most people are Jerrys. They don't think deeply about existence, they just try to get through the day and hope people like them. This isn't noble or philosophically sophisticated, but it works for survival. The show doesn't endorse Jerry's approach, but it also doesn't completely condemn it. Beth represents what happens when you're caught in between. Smart enough to be dissatisfied, but not wise enough to find a way forward. Beth knows she could have been more, should have been more, but she's trapped by her own damage and her desperate need for Rick's approval. She can't embrace Jerry's ignorance, can't achieve Rick's genius, and hasn't developed Morty's wisdom or Summer's practicality. Beth is stuck, and her stuckness makes her mean. Mr. Meeseeks and Evil Morty represent opposite extremes of the purpose question. Meeseeks have purpose but no freedom, which creates suffering. Evil Morty achieves freedom, but only through destroying his connections to everything and everyone. The show suggests both extremes are problems. You need some purpose to give structure to life, but you also need freedom to make that purpose your own choice, rather than an external imposition. The Citadel shows what happens when you try to build a society purely on utility and replaceability. It becomes oppressive, hierarchical, and violent. Even among infinite copies of yourself, treating individuals as replaceable creates conditions for abuse. The show argues that each specific instance of consciousness, each particular person living through their particular life, has value regardless of how many copies exist elsewhere. The memory episode suggests that your experiences, including painful ones, are essential to who you are. You can't delete the bad parts without changing yourself fundamentally. Growth requires remembering your mistakes. Wisdom requires processing pain. Authenticity requires accepting your full history, not just the parts you like. So how does all this come together into practical guidance for living? The show seems to suggest several principles. First, accept that cosmic meaning doesn't exist. The universe wasn't designed for you, doesn't care about you, and won't validate your existence. Looking for cosmic purpose is a waste of time. This is Rick's insight, and it's valuable, just not in the way Rick uses it. Second, recognize that local meaning is still possible and valuable. Just because the universe doesn't care, doesn't mean people can't care about each other. Your relationships, your choices, your experiences matter to you and to the people you affect, even if they don't matter to the cosmos. This is Morty's wisdom. Third, take action anyway. Don't let awareness of meaninglessness paralyze you. Choose your values, pursue your goals, help people you care about, and create the kind of life you want to live. This is Summer's practicality. Fourth, maintain connections even when it's difficult. Family is frustrating, relationships are messy, and people disappoint you. But isolation is worse. Rick's loneliness shows that cutting yourself off from connection doesn't protect you from pain. It just makes the pain lonelier. The family keeps coming back together despite everything because connection is how humans survive meaninglessness. Fifth, let yourself grow through experience. Don't erase painful memories or avoid difficult lessons. Your mistakes and trauma are part of your story. Processing them, learning from them, and carrying them is how you become wise rather than just old. This is what the memory episodes teach. The show's title itself, Rick and Morty, represents this balance. Rick is genius intellect, paired with emotional damage and nihilistic cruelty. Morty is average intelligence, paired with emotional openness and growing wisdom. The show needs both of them. Rick without Morty is just destruction and misery. Morty without Rick never faces the challenges that help him grow. Together, they are more complete. This extends to the whole family. They need each other precisely because they're so different. Rick's intelligence, Morty's compassion, Summer's practicality, Beth's drive, and even Jerry's groundedness each brings something to the family system. They're dysfunctional together, but they'd be worse apart. The show also uses humor as a philosophical tool. Comedy is how you survive cosmic horror. When you're faced with the absurdity of existence, you can either despair or laugh. Rick and Morty chooses laughter, not as denial, but as rebellion. The show makes jokes about the darkest possible subjects because humor is a way of asserting human dignity in an indifferent universe. There's a scene in Season 2's autoerotic assimilation where Rick builds a machine to kill himself after Unity breaks up with him. He passes out drunk before he can activate it. The next episode starts with Rick waking up and just moving on like nothing happened. The show doesn't dwell on his near suicide. It presents this moment of ultimate despair and then just continues with the next adventure. This might seem callous, but it's actually the show's philosophy in action. Life is full of moments of despair and horror, but life continues anyway. You have to keep going. You don't get to stop just because things are hard or painful or meaningless. The universe doesn't care about your suffering, so you have to care about your own survival and find reasons to keep living, even when there's no cosmic reason to do so. The episode, The Vat of Acid episode, makes this explicit. Rick tries to teach Morty a lesson about consequences by giving him a remote that seems to let him undo anything. Morty uses it freely, thinking there are no real consequences. But then he loses something precious and realizes that consequences are what make experiences meaningful. The pain of loss, the permanence of choice, these are what give weight to life. The show argues that you need consequences, you need stakes. You need to know that your choices matter and can't be undone. This is why Rick's ability to jump dimensions and replace himself is ultimately hollow. If you can always undo your mistakes, nothing you do matters. Meaning comes from commitment, from making choices knowing they can't be taken back. In Season 6's final decimation, the show presents this idea through a fortune cookie that supposedly predicts your death. The family becomes obsessed with whether fate is real or if they have free will. The episode's resolution suggests that whether or not fate exists doesn't matter as much as whether you believe in your own agency. If you act like your choices matter, they effectively do matter because they shape your life. This is practical philosophy. Regardless of whether free will technically exists on a cosmic level, you have to act as if you have choices, and those choices matter. Otherwise, you become paralyzed and passive, letting life happen to you instead of actively participating in it. The show's treatment of consequences extends to how characters develop. Unlike many animated shows where characters reset to baseline each episode, Rick and Morty accumulates trauma and growth. Morty isn't the same anxious kid from Season 1. He's become competent, cynical, and capable while retaining his core compassion. Summer has gone from shallow teenager to genuinely formidable. Even Rick shows development, becoming slightly more vulnerable and connected over time. This accumulation matters. It shows that experiences change you, that you can't go back to innocence once lost, but also that you can grow into something stronger through your trials. The show respects its characters enough to let them be permanently affected by what they experience. Rick and Morty ultimately presents a philosophy of defiant living in an absurd universe. The cosmos is meaningless, but you can create meaning through choices and connections. Nothing matters cosmically, but things can matter to you personally. You're insignificant in the grand scheme, but you're significant to the people who know and care about you. Death is inevitable, and oblivion awaits, but the moments you have before then are real and can be filled with joy, love, growth, and purpose that you choose for yourself. This isn't optimism. The show is too honest about suffering and meaninglessness for that. But it's not pure nihilism either. The show cares too much about its characters and their relationships for that. It's something in between. Clear-eyed acknowledgement of life's fundamental absurdity, paired with stubborn insistence on living, connecting, and caring anyway. The family keeps coming back to the dinner table. They keep watching interdimensional cable together. They keep saving each other despite everything. This is the show's answer. When the universe offers you no meaning, you create it yourself through the people you choose to care about and the life you choose to build. One small moment at a time. Knowing it won't last, but doing it anyway, because the alternative, Rick's isolated, drunken misery, is so much worse. In the end, Rick and Morty doesn't solve philosophy. It doesn't give you a single answer to life's biggest questions, but it shows you multiple ways people respond to meaninglessness and suggests that the healthiest approach involves acknowledging the void, maintaining connections despite it, choosing your values deliberately, and finding ways to laugh at the absurdity of it all. That might not be cosmic wisdom, but it's enough to get you through another day, and sometimes that's all the meaning anyone really needs. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.